The pristine mahogany desk occupied the center of Nathan Reed's cramped apartment like a chess piece on the wrong board. Too large, too grand for the modest space, yet it represented everything the 24-year-old aspired to achieve. His fingers flew over the keyboard, finalizing expense reports and itineraries for tomorrow's Miami trip. A framed business degree from Penn State hung on the wall above, a reminder of dreams temporarily shelved. The phone vibrated. His father's name appeared on the screen. Nathan's stomach tightened. He'd been dreading this call, knowing the latest medical bills had arrived yesterday. "Dad, hey, how are you feeling today?" Nathan leaned back in his chair, tension evident in his voice despite his attempt to sound casual. The labored breathing on the other end spoke volumes before his father did. "Better than yesterday. Doctor says the new medication might help with the fluid buildup." A pause followed by a wet cough. "Son, we need to talk about these bills." Nathan closed his eyes. "Don't worry about that now. I'm handling it. By fetching coffee for that ice queen, you deserve better than being someone's errand boy. That business degree? It's temporary, Dad. The job at Blake Financial pays well, has good benefits. That's what matters right now." Nathan glanced at his watch. 9:47 p.m. Nearly 3 hours of prep work remained before tomorrow's flight. After reassuring his father and ending the call, Nathan returned to his laptop. On screen, a complex presentation for Eleanor Blake, CEO of Blake Financial, one of New York's most formidable investment firms. His boss of 11 months. The woman whose coffee order he knew better than his own blood type. The alarm blared at 4:30 a.m. Nathan showered quickly, dressed in his one decent suit, and triple-checked his briefcase. The taxi arrived at 5:15, carrying him to Blake Financial's private airfield in New Jersey. The sleek Gulfstream G650 gleamed in the early morning light, its polished surface reflecting Nathan's anxiety back at him. Private aviation. Yet another world he didn't belong in. He approached the plain briefcase clutched in a white-knuckled grip. "You're 3 minutes early. That's new." Eleanor Blake stood at the foot of the stairs, tablet in hand. At 40, she embodied everything intimidating about New York's financial elite. Impeccable navy pantsuit, shoulder-length dark hair styled with precision, and eyes that evaluated everyone's market value in seconds. She wore her success like armor, every gesture calculated, every expression measured. Nathan straightened his posture. "Good morning, Ms. Blake. I've loaded all the Miami presentation materials onto your tablet, updated with the latest figures from accounting." She didn't acknowledge his words, merely extending her hand for the coffee he'd picked up en route. "The Henderson pitch needs to be flawless. 50 million doesn't just fall into our laps." She sipped the coffee, frowning slightly. "This isn't hot enough." "I apologize. The traffic from..." "Details matter, Nathan, in everything." She ascended the stairs without waiting for his response. Nathan exhaled slowly, counting to 10 before following. 11 months of this. 11 months of impeccable service met with criticism or silence. 11 months of swallowing his pride, remembering his father's medical bills, his student loans, the fragile safety net this job provided. Inside the jet, Eleanor had already claimed the forward-facing seat, tablet open, fingers swiping through documents. Nathan settled across from her, arranging his materials on the polished table between them. The Henderson portfolio analysis shows promising growth potential in their Asian markets. He ventured, attempting to demonstrate his value beyond coffee retrieval. Eleanor glanced up, surprise briefly crossing her features before her expression returned to neutral. "I'm aware. Have you reviewed their domestic manufacturing reports?" "Yes, they're showing a 7% decline year over year, but I've identified 3 key factors that explain the temporary downturn." Nathan pulled up the relevant charts on his laptop. Their new facility in Detroit hasn't reached full production capacity yet, but once operational, it should reverse the trend by Q3. Something shifted in Eleanor's gaze, not quite approval, but perhaps reassessment. "Interesting observation. What else have you noticed?" For the next 20 minutes, they discussed the Henderson portfolio in detail. Nathan felt a glimmer of recognition, his business acumen acknowledged, however briefly. Then her phone rang. CFO flashed on the screen. Eleanor's expression hardened. "Give me the cabin." Not a request, but a command. Nathan nodded, gathering his materials and retreating to the rear of the plane. Through the privacy glass, he could see Eleanor's rigid posture, her hand gestures becoming increasingly agitated. The numbers don't add up, Richard. Her voice carried despite her attempt to keep it low. If the SEC requests an audit, the rest became inaudible as the engines roared to life. Nathan settled into a passenger seat, fastening his seatbelt, as the captain announced their imminent departure. The conversation at the front of the cabin continued, Eleanor's face growing more severe by the second. When she ended the call, Nathan noticed her knuckles were white against the armrest. She caught his gaze and immediately composed herself, the mask of professional detachment slipping back into place. "Is everything all right?" he ventured. "Nothing that concerns you." She turned toward the window, conversation clearly terminated. The takeoff was smooth, the jet climbing rapidly above the Manhattan skyline. Nathan reviewed his notes, occasionally glancing toward Eleanor, who remained fixated on her tablet, her posture betraying the tension their earlier conversation had created. 30 minutes into the flight, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ms. Blake, we're tracking some weather systems ahead. Recommendation is to divert south to avoid the worst of it." Eleanor pressed the intercom button without looking up from her documents. "How much time would that add?" "Approximately 40 minutes, ma'am." She frowned. "Not acceptable. The Henderson meeting is scheduled for noon sharp. Proceed on our current course." "With respect, Ms. Blake, the forecast shows significant turbulence. And I said proceed. We'll manage." She released the button, ending the discussion. Nathan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Ms. Blake, perhaps we should consider the captain's recommendation. The Henderson group would surely understand a weather delay." Her eyes met his, cold and unyielding. "I didn't ask for your input, Nathan. First rule of business, never show weakness. Rescheduling at the last minute projects uncertainty." She returned to her work subject, closed. Within 20 minutes, the first signs of turbulence began. Gentle at first, the occasional tremor, a slight dip. Eleanor continued working, seemingly unbothered. Nathan gripped his arm rest tighter with each bump, his stomach lurching. Outside the windows, dense gray clouds enveloped the aircraft. The tremors intensified, the jet now shuddering continuously. The captain's voice returned, strain evident. "Ms. Blake, conditions are deteriorating rapidly. We're experiencing stronger winds than forecasted. I strongly advise diverting immediately." Before Eleanor could respond, the plane dropped suddenly like an elevator with snapped cables. Coffee splashed across the table, documents scattered. Nathan's laptop slid from his grasp, clattering to the floor. Eleanor's composure cracked visibly. Her face paled, fingers gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles blanched white. "Captain, what's happening?" "Severe downdraft. We're attempting to climb above." Another violent drop cut off his words. Overhead compartments sprung open, bags tumbling into the aisle. The luxury cabin transformed into chaos within seconds. Nathan unbuckled his seatbelt, lunging to secure loose items before they became projectiles. "Ms. Blake, we need to prepare for emergency procedures." His voice remained steady, drawing on training from a college summer job as a whitewater rafting guide. Emergencies required calm. She stared at him, momentarily frozen. The plane banked sharply, right throwing Nathan against the cabin wall. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he regained his balance, moving toward Eleanor. "Put this on." He handed her the oxygen mask that had dropped from the ceiling. "Secure yours first before helping others. Just like they always say." For once, she followed his direction without question, hands trembling slightly as she positioned the mask. The intercom crackled again. "Brace for impact, brace positions now." Nathan had seconds to react. He secured Eleanor's seatbelt, ensuring it was tight across her hips. "Bend forward, arms under your thighs, head down against your knees," he instructed, demonstrating the position before securing himself in the adjacent seat. Through the windows, glimpses of blue flashed between cloud breaks. The ocean much closer than it should be. The aircraft's descent was no longer gradual, but a terrifying plummet. Eleanor's eyes, wide with fear, met his over the rim of her oxygen mask. For the first time, he saw vulnerability beneath the corporate armor, raw humanity breaking through. "If we don't," she began. "We will," Nathan interrupted, projecting conviction he didn't entirely feel. The impact came with brutal force. Metal screamed as the aircraft's belly struck water, then something solid. Land. Nathan's world became a kaleidoscope of sensation, the jolt of his body against restraints, The shriek of tearing metal, the smell of fuel and smoke, a flash of searing pain across his forehead, then darkness. Consciousness returned in fragments. Salt air, burning metal, pain throbbing behind his eyes. Nathan blinked, struggling to orient himself. The aircraft cabin was unrecognizable. Torn open on one side, sunlight streaming through the gash. Half submerged in shallow water, the fuselage had come to rest on what appeared to be a beach. Ms. Blake, his voice sounded foreign, raspy. He unfastened his seatbelt, wincing as pain shot through his ribs. Eleanor! A soft groan came from beneath a displaced seat cushion. Nathan pushed aside debris, finding Eleanor pinned against the wall, a gash across her cheek, blood matting her hair. Her eyes fluttered open, disorientation evident in her unfocused gaze. "Don't move yet," he cautioned, assessing her condition. "Can you feel your legs, arms?" She nodded slowly, wincing. "Everything hurts, but I can move." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Nathan carefully helped her upright, supporting her weight as they navigated through the wreckage toward the opening. The aircraft had split near the cockpit, the front section partially submerged in shallow turquoise water. "The pilots," Eleanor murmured, taking a step toward the cockpit. Nathan gently restrained her. "Let me check." The cockpit door had been ripped away, revealing a scene that confirmed his worst fears. Both pilots remained strapped in their seats, unmoving necks at unnatural angles. The impact had been fatal for them. He returned to Eleanor, the grim news evident in his expression, without words. She closed her eyes briefly, composing herself. "We need to call for help." "My phone." "Already tried mine, no signal." Nathan gestured to the surrounding landscape, pristine beach stretching in both directions, dense tropical vegetation beyond no sign of human habitation. "We should gather whatever supplies we can from the wreckage. Water, first aid, anything useful." Eleanor attempted to assume control, her professional instincts surfacing. "We should stay with the plane. That's standard procedure. Rescue teams will locate the transponder signal." If it's still transmitting, Nathan surveyed the extensively damaged aircraft, and if they're looking in the right area, we diverted course significantly. He didn't add what they both knew. Eleanor's decision to continue through the storm had placed them far from their expected flight path. Her face tightened, acknowledging the unspoken rebuke. "Fine, what do you suggest?" "First, we need shelter from the sun, then water, medical supplies, and any food from the galley. We need to take stock of our situation rationally." For the next hour, they worked in near silence, salvaging what they could from the wreckage. Nathan found the first aid kit and tended to Eleanor's facial laceration, cleaning it carefully. She flinched at his touch, but remained still, watching him with curious intensity. "You seem remarkably prepared for a crisis," she observed as he applied antiseptic to her wound. Nathan shrugged. "Eagle Scout, plus I worked as a wilderness guide during college summers. Basic emergency response was part of the training. Yet you chose to become an assistant." Something in her tone sparked irritation. "I chose to pay my bills and my father's medical expenses. The business degree was supposed to lead elsewhere." He secured the bandage perhaps more firmly than necessary. "Not all of us had clear paths laid out for us." Surprise registered in her expression, clearly unaccustomed to subordinates speaking so directly. Before she could respond, Nathan turned away, continuing to organize their salvage supplies. By sunset, they had established a makeshift camp near the tree line using aircraft blankets and cushions for bedding. The galley had yielded bottled water, packaged snacks, and a few meal kits, enough for several days if rationed carefully. The tropical heat was oppressive, sweat soaking through Nathan's once crisp shirt, now torn and smudged with dirt and blood. Eleanor sat on a section of aircraft insulation, staring at her useless phone. Her tailored suit was in tatters, designer shoes abandoned for bare feet, hair falling loose around her shoulders. Without makeup and corporate armor, she looked younger, more vulnerable, a stark transformation from the intimidating CEO of that morning. "We should be practical about our situation," Nathan said, handing her a bottle of water. "We don't know where we are exactly, but judging from our flight time and direction, we're likely on an island somewhere in the Caribbean." Eleanor took a small, measured sip of water. "The company will realize something's wrong when we don't arrive in Miami." "Yes, but they'll be searching along our approved flight path first. Since we diverted," he left the implication hanging. "You're suggesting we could be here for some time." I'm suggesting we prepare for that possibility, yes. Nathan gestured toward the dense forest behind them. Tomorrow I'll explore inland, look for fresh water. The bottles won't last more than a few days in this heat. Eleanor straightened, resuming her authoritative posture despite their surroundings. We should remain on the beach. That's where rescue will look first. We need to secure water, food, and better shelter regardless. One of us should stay here, maintain a signal fire while the other explores. Nathan's tone was reasonable but firm. Unless you have wilderness survival experience I'm unaware of. Her eyes narrowed. Just because circumstances have changed doesn't mean our professional relationship has, Mr. Reed. Nathan stared at her incredulously. Are you serious right now? Look around you. There is no Blake Financial here. There's no hierarchy. There's just two people who need to survive until rescue arrives. And you assume you're automatically in charge because you were an Eagle Scout. I assume we both have skills that will help us survive. Mine happen to be more applicable to our current situation. Nathan gestured toward the darkening jungle. Out here knowing how to close a $50 million deal doesn't matter. Finding water does. Eleanor's jaw tightened, clearly unaccustomed to being challenged. Fine. You explore. I'll maintain the signal fire. Good. Nathan gathered palm fronds to create a windbreak for their sleeping area. We should take inventory of all injuries too. Adrenaline can mask serious problems. Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. My left ankle is swollen, possibly sprained. In my head, she touched the bandaged cut. Headache. Likely a mild concussion. You should rest. Nathan gestured to the makeshift bed he'd arranged. I'll take first watch, keep the fire going. For a moment it seemed she might argue further, maintaining her need for control. Instead, exhaustion won. She lowered herself carefully onto the cushions, wincing slightly. Nathan, she said, using his first name for perhaps the second time since he'd been employed. Thank you for... She gestured vaguely, seeming to encompass everything from the emergency response to the current arrangements. He nodded, surprised by the acknowledgement. Get some rest, Ms. Blake. Eleanor, she corrected quietly, eyes already closing. I think circumstances warrant first names. Nathan tended the fire as darkness enveloped the beach, the flames illuminating their small territory in a bubble of light. Beyond, the vast darkness of ocean and jungle surrounded them completely. The reality of their situation settled over him like a weight. They were utterly alone, their survival entirely in their own hands. Morning arrived with harsh brilliance, sunlight reflecting off white sand with blinding intensity. Nathan woke with a start, momentarily disoriented. The events of the previous day crashed back with cruel clarity. Eleanor was already awake, attempting to organize their supplies with methodical precision. Her face was pale beneath her tan, dark circles, prominent under her eyes. You should have woken me for my shift, Nathan said, sitting up stiffly. Every muscle protested injuries from the crash, making themselves known with vengeance. You needed rest. She didn't meet his eyes, focusing instead on arranging water bottles in neat rows. I've been thinking about our strategy. We should establish a daily routine, conserve energy, and maintain regular signal fires. Nathan nodded, recognizing her attempt to regain control through organization. Agreed. I'll explore inland, first try to find fresh water. I think we should stay together. Her voice held a note he hadn't heard before, uncertainty. One of us needs to maintain a presence on the beach in case of rescue aircraft, he countered, and you should rest that ankle. Eleanor's lips thinned, but she didn't argue. Take one of the emergency flares. Signal if you find anything significant. Nathan gathered supplies, a salvaged water bottle, a makeshift container from aircraft debris, and a first aid kit. I'll be back before midday. If I'm not, he hesitated. You will be, she said firmly. The jungle was dense humidity, creating a palpable weight in the air. Nathan pushed through undergrowth, marking his path with broken branches, alert for signs of fresh water. His business clothes, now filthy and torn, clung uncomfortably to his skin. An hour into his exploration, the vegetation thinned, revealing a small clearing. At its center, a rocky outcropping formed a natural basin where rainwater had collected. Not abundant, but clean and fresh. Relief flooded through him. Water meant survival. He filled his containers carefully, then continued exploring, discovering several fruit-bearing trees he recognized as safe. Papaya, some kind of wild citrus, and coconut palms. When he returned to the beach, Eleanor was exactly where he'd left her, though she'd managed to arrange their salvage items with military precision. She looked up at his approach, tension visibly leaving her body. "You found water." Not a question. She'd noted his filled containers immediately. "And potential food sources." He set down his findings. "Enough to sustain us while we wait for rescue." Eleanor examined the fruit cautiously. "Are you certain these are safe?" "The papaya and citrus, yes. We'll need to test the others gradually." Nathan took a small sip of the collected water, offering the container to her. "It's clean, rainwater collected in a rock basin." She accepted the water, their fingers brushing momentarily during the exchange. The small contact, human connection in their isolation, seemed to register with both of them simultaneously. Eleanor withdrew her hand quickly, focusing on the water rather than the moment of unexpected intimacy. "We should establish a more permanent camp," Nathan suggested, breaking the awkward silence. "Something further from the beach, but still visible to passing aircraft." "No," Eleanor countered immediately. "We stay on the beach. That's standard rescue procedure. The sun here is brutal. We need better shelter and we need to be near the water source." "Then bring the water here." Her tone shifted back to the CEO commanding an employee. Nathan exhaled slowly, controlling his frustration. "Look, I understand you want to maximize chances of rescue, but we don't know how long we'll be here. Days, possibly weeks. We need sustainable shelter, access to water and food. The beach offers none of that. I'm not moving inland where rescue planes might miss us." Her voice rose slightly, the first crack in her composed facade. "I have responsibilities. People depending on me. I can't just disappear into the jungle on your amateur survival advice." "My amateur advice is what found us water." Nathan's patience finally snapped. "You may be in charge of a company, but you know nothing about this situation. Your stubborn insistence on control could kill us both." Eleanor stared at him, shock registering at his outburst. In 11 months, he had never raised his voice, never challenged her authority so directly. "I'll stay on the beach," she said coldly. "You do what you think best." "Fine." Nathan gathered the water containers. "I'll establish a camp near the water source. When you're ready to be reasonable, you know which direction to go." He turned, striding toward the tree line. "Where do you think you're going with our water?" Eleanor called after him. "Our water is staying with me," he answered without turning. "You're welcome to your share when you accept reality." He continued into the jungle without looking back, knowing he'd crossed a line that would have meant immediate termination under normal circumstances. But normalcy had been left behind with the wreckage of the plane. The afternoon passed with Nathan constructing a simple shelter near the water source using techniques he remembered from his wilderness guide training. Large palm fronds provided roof coverage. Fallen branches created a frame, vines bound the structure together. By sunset, he'd created a functional, if basic, lean-to that would protect from rain and provide shade. He was collecting additional fruit when a crashing sound announced someone moving through the undergrowth with little regard for stealth. Eleanor appeared in the clearing, limping slightly, her expression a complex mixture of anger, exhaustion, and grudging acceptance. "The beach is too exposed," she stated without preamble, "and the emergency rations won't last." Nathan nodded, recognizing this as the closest thing to concession he would receive. "This shelter should accommodate both of us. I'll help you gather materials for bedding." Eleanor surveyed his construction with an appraising eye. "It's adequate, though the support structure could be reinforced here." She pointed to a section of the frame. "Feel free to apply your engineering expertise," Nathan replied dryly. Surprisingly, she did exactly that, spending the next hour meticulously improving the shelter's stability. Nathan watched with growing appreciation as her analytical mind applied itself to their practical problems. By nightfall, their shelter was significantly more robust. They ate a small meal of emergency rations supplemented with fruit sitting side by side at the entrance to their shelter. The jungle sounds created an alien symphony around them. Insects, distant bird calls, rustling leaves. "I've never heard such noise," Eleanor remarked, breaking their extended silence. "New York has its own cacophony, but this is different." "It's life," Nathan replied. "Millions of creatures just going about their business, unaware of human concerns." Eleanor considered this, staring into the darkness. "It's humbling. Yesterday I was worried about quarterly projections and board presentations. Today I'm concerned about clean water and shelter." Maslow's hierarchy in action. She glanced at him surprised. You remember your business theories? I graduated with honors, he reminded her mildly. The degree isn't just decoration. Eleanor had the grace to look slightly abashed. I never reviewed your full resume. HR handles initial screening for assistants. Of course, Nathan kept his tone neutral. Why would you bother learning about the person who manages your schedule, prepares your presentations, and knows how you take your coffee? Eleanor stiffened. That's unfair. I run a company with over 200 employees. I can't personally know everyone's life story. But you could know mine, he countered. 11 months, Eleanor. I've worked directly with you every day for nearly a year. You've never once asked about my education, my background, my father's illness, nothing. She fell silent, the accusation hanging between them. Finally, she spoke, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. You're right, that was an oversight on my part. The admission, so contrary to her usual refusal to acknowledge mistakes, caught Nathan off guard. Before he could respond, she continued, Tell me now then, why is someone with a business degree from Penn State fetching coffee? Nathan considered deflecting, but decided the honesty served better under their circumstances. My father has pulmonary fibrosis, progressive and curable. When I graduated, he couldn't work anymore. The medical bills, he shrugged. Your company offers excellent health insurance for dependents. The salary covers rent and student loans. It wasn't my dream job, but it was what we needed. Eleanor absorbed this, her expression thoughtful. And what was the dream before reality intervened? Small business consulting, helping startups navigate their early stages. Nathan smiled faintly. Ironic, right? I wanted to help build businesses from the ground up, and instead I'm working for one of the largest financial firms in New York. Life rarely follows our carefully constructed plans. Eleanor agreed, a hint of personal knowledge coloring her words. Your father, is there anyone looking after him now? The question, unexpectedly considerate, surprised Nathan. My aunt. She'll notice something's wrong when I don't call tonight. They'll find us, Eleanor said with conviction. Blake Financial has resources. When we miss the Miami meeting, they'll initiate search procedures. Nathan didn't contradict her, though he knew the realities of ocean crashes. Search areas could span thousands of square miles, and with their diverted course, rescuers might be looking in entirely the wrong region. As darkness deepened, they retreated into their shelter. The close quarters forced an intimacy neither had anticipated. Two people who had maintained rigid professional boundaries now lying side by side on beds of palm fronds, separated by mere inches. Nathan, Eleanor said quietly in the darkness, I'm sorry about your father, and thank you for today, for finding water, building shelter. You're welcome, he replied, the simple exchange marking a subtle shift in their relationship. No longer purely boss and employee, but two humans facing adversity together. Morning brought new challenges. Eleanor woke first, attempting to rekindle their small fire without waking Nathan. The sound of her frustrated efforts roused him anyway. Here, let me, he offered, demonstrating the proper technique. You have to create a nest for the spark. Eleanor watched intently, memorizing the method. Show me again. They spent the early hours establishing a routine, gathering water, collecting fruit, improving their shelter. Eleanor proved surprisingly adaptable, approaching survival tasks with the same analytical precision she applied to business problems. We should create a map, she suggested, using charcoal, from the fire to draw on a salvaged piece of aircraft paneling. Mark water sources, fruit trees, the crash site. Establish a territory we understand. Nathan nodded, impressed by her practical thinking. Good idea. We should also set up rainwater collection. Those clouds suggest afternoon showers might be common. Working together, they constructed a simple catchment system using aircraft debris and broad leaves. Their collaborative efforts created an unexpected rapport, or professional barriers gradually eroding through shared purpose. By midday, however, the brutal heat sapped their energy. Nathan noticed Eleanor growing increasingly pale, her movements sluggish. You should rest, he advised. Heat exhaustion is a real risk. She shook her head stubbornly. There's too much to do, which we can't accomplish if you collapse. He guided her firmly toward the shelter. Rest during the hottest part of the day. It's not just common sense. It's standard practice in tropical environments. Reluctantly, she complied, retreating to the shade. Nathan continued working, establishing a perimeter of cleared vegetation around their camp. He was checking their fruit supplies when Eleanor's voice called from the shelter, tinged with alarm. "Nathan, come look at this." He found her examining the contents of her salvaged briefcase, papers spread across the ground. Among them, several documents bore the Blake Financial logo marked "Confidential" in bold red letters. "What is it?" he asked. Eleanor's expression was grim. "I think I know why Richard was so agitated on the phone. These financial projections, they've been altered. Someone's been manipulating our quarterly reports." Nathan scanned the documents. Though not an accountant, his business education allowed him to recognize significant discrepancies. "These numbers don't align with the Henderson portfolio analysis I prepared." "Exactly. Someone's been cooking the books." Eleanor's hands trembled slightly. "If this reaches the SEC, I said, "You didn't know." Nathan studied her reaction carefully. "Of course not." Indignation flashed across her features. "I built Blake Financial on integrity. This," she gestured at the papers, "this could destroy everything." The revelation created a new dimension to their situation. Beyond mere survival, Eleanor now faced the knowledge that her company might be imploding in her absence, and not just from her disappearance, but from potential fraud. "Richard must be behind this," she murmured almost to herself. "The call before takeoff. He was warning me about potential irregularities, trying to gauge if I suspected anything." Nathan considered the implications. "If we're rescued, you can address it immediately." "If," Eleanor repeated the word, heavy with doubt. 3 days had passed since the crash, with no sign of search aircraft or vessels. Nathan recognized the fear beneath her controlled exterior. "We will be rescued. Until then, we focus on survival." She nodded, gathering the documents carefully. "Yes, survival first." That evening, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, the air heavy with impending rain. Nathan secured their shelter, creating additional coverage against the approaching storm. "Will it hold?" Eleanor asked, eyeing the thickening clouds anxiously. "It should, though we haven't tested it against serious weather yet." Nathan finished reinforcing the roof. "These tropical storms can be intense, but usually pass quickly." The rain began as gentle drops, quickly intensifying to a driving downpour. They retreated into their shelter, watching sheets of water cascade beyond the entrance. Their makeshift roof held initially small leaks, appearing but not compromising the structure. Thunder boomed overhead, lightning illuminating the jungle in stark flashes. The storm's intensity grew, wind now bending trees at alarming angles. "Is this normal?" Eleanor had to raise her voice above the howling wind. "Not entirely," Nathan admitted. "This seems more severe than a typical—" His words cut off as a tremendous crack split the air. A massive palm tree outside their shelter swayed dangerously, roots partially exposed by the wind. "We need to move." Nathan grabbed Eleanor's arm, pulling her toward the shelter entrance. "That tree's coming down." They barely cleared the structure when the palm crashed through their roof, obliterating the shelter they'd spent days constructing. Rain lashed them mercilessly as they stood exposed to the storm's fury. "The beach cave," Eleanor shouted, gesturing toward the direction of the shore. "I found it yesterday while gathering shells." Nathan nodded, and they ran through the torrential rain, following Eleanor's lead. The jungle path was treacherous mud, sliding beneath their feet, branches whipping in the wind. Eleanor stumbled on her still tender ankle, crying out in pain. Without hesitation, Nathan lifted her, carrying her through the worst of the terrain. She clung to him, face pressed against his shoulder, as he navigated the hazardous path toward the shore. The cave appeared as a dark opening in the rocky coastline, barely visible through the sheets of rain. Nathan ducked inside, gently lowering Eleanor to the ground. The space was small but dry, the rock formation protecting them from wind and rain. They sat huddled together, soaked and shivering, listening to the storm rage outside. Eleanor's body trembled against his, whether from cold or fear, he couldn't tell. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. She shook her head. "Just my ankle again. Thank you for—" She gestured vaguely, encompassing his actions. Nathan nodded, suddenly acutely aware of their proximity. In the darkness, Eleanor seemed smaller, more vulnerable than her corporate persona had ever allowed. Her hair plastered against her face by rain made her look younger, more human. "We've lost everything," she said quietly. "The shelter, our supplies. We can rebuild." Nathan's voice held more confidence than he felt. Tomorrow when the storm passes. The important thing is we're safe. Eleanor laughed, a short, bitter sound. Safe. Stranded on an unknown island, no rescue in sight, our shelter destroyed. Is that your definition of safe? We're alive, Nathan countered. We have water, food sources, and each other. That's more than many shipwreck survivors could claim. She fell silent, considering his words. Outside, the storm continued its assault waves, crashing against the shore with increasing violence. I'm not usually this, Eleanor hesitated. Human, Nathan suggested. She glanced at him sharply, then unexpectedly smiled, a genuine expression he'd rarely witnessed. I was going to say vulnerable, but perhaps human is more accurate. Everyone's human, Eleanor, even CEOs. Blake Financial doesn't reward humanity, she replied quietly. Weakness isn't tolerated in finance. Is that why you maintain such distance with everyone? She didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the cave entrance where lightning periodically illuminated the tumultuous sea. After my divorce, I learned that attachment is liability. Personal connections can be weaponized against you. The admission, so personal, so unexpected, caught Nathan off guard. In nearly a year of working closely with her, he had known nothing of her marriage. I'm sorry, he said simply. Don't be. It was years ago. Her tone aimed for dismissive, but landed closer to resigned. Thomas was another investment banker. We were the perfect power couple until he decided my success threatened his ego. The divorce was brutal. Nathan remained silent, sensing she needed to speak more than she needed response. He tried to take half my company, she continued, claimed he'd been instrumental in its success despite having no official role. It taught me a valuable lesson about keeping business and personal life entirely separate. And now, Nathan asked quietly, now I have a successful company in an empty penthouse. The stark honesty of her answer hung between them. Until recently, that seemed like an acceptable trade. Until recently, Eleanor turned toward him, her expression half hidden in shadow. Until I found myself on this island, realizing that if I died here, the sum total of my legacy would be quarterly reports and acquisition deals. No one would genuinely mourn Eleanor Blake the person. The rawness of her confession created a moment of profound connection between them. No longer CEO and assistant, but two individuals confronting mortality and meaning. I'd mourn you, Nathan said simply. She studied him in the dim light, surprise evident in her features. Would you after how I've treated you? I'd mourn the Eleanor I'm getting to know here, he clarified. The one who improved our shelter design, who adapts to challenges, who just shared something deeply personal with me. That person is worth mourning. Eleanor's expression softened, vulnerability and gratitude briefly visible before she composed herself again. We should try to rest. Tomorrow will require significant effort to rebuild. But as they settled against the cave wall, she remained closer to him than necessary, their shoulders touching in the darkness. The simple contact, a concession to human need for connection, spoke volumes from a woman who had systematically isolated herself from emotional attachment. Outside, the storm gradually subsided, rain softening to a gentle patter. Nathan remained awake long after Eleanor's breathing had deepened into sleep, her head eventually coming to rest against his shoulder. The trust implicit in that unconscious gesture affected him more profoundly than he would have expected. In the space of 4 days, everything had changed between them. Professional boundaries dissolving in the face of shared survival, mutual respect growing through collaborative effort, and something else. Something neither had anticipated beginning to take root in the fertile ground of their isolation. Morning arrived with brilliant clarity, the storm's violence replaced by pristine calm. They emerged from the cave to find the beach transformed. Debris scattered across the sand palm tree bent at new angles, the ocean placid and innocent. We should check on our camp, Nathan suggested, surveying the altered landscape. See what can be salvaged. Their inland shelter was beyond recovery, the fallen palm having crushed most of their construction. However, many of their supplies remained viable, protected by the dense foliage that had collapsed around rather than on them. We rebuild, Eleanor stated simply, already gathering usable materials. Better and stronger this time. Nathan watched her with newfound admiration. The woman who had once seemed so removed from practical matters now methodically sorted salvageable items, prioritizing needs with surprising expertise. We could relocate closer to the beach, he suggested. Split the difference between ocean visibility and jungle resources. Eleanor considered this weighing options with the same analytical precision she applied to investment strategies. Logical compromise. The cave provides emergency backup in case of another storm. They selected a location halfway between their water source and the shore, a small rise that offered both visibility and protection. Working together, they constructed a more substantial shelter, incorporating lessons from their previous attempt. Eleanor proved unexpectedly resourceful, suggesting structural improvements that Nathan wouldn't have considered. Her corporate strategy skills translated effectively to survival planning, approaching their situation as a problem requiring optimal solution. In business, contingency planning is essential, she explained, weaving palm fronds into a tighter pattern for their roof. Always prepare for worst-case scenarios. By late afternoon, their new shelter stood complete, larger, more stable, in better position than their first attempt. Both stood back, admiring their creation with justified pride. "Not bad for a CEO and an assistant," Nathan remarked. Eleanor smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face, erasing the stern lines of authority. "I think we've moved beyond those titles, don't you?" The simple acknowledgement marked another shift in their evolving relationship, a recognition that island survival had rendered corporate hierarchy meaningless. That evening, sitting before their small fire, Nathan noticed Eleanor examining her hands. Once manicured to perfection, they now showed calluses and minor cuts from their labor. "Battle scars," he commented, noticing her scrutiny. She flexed her fingers thoughtfully. "I haven't worked with my hands since I was a teenager. Summer job at my uncle's hardware store." The great Eleanor Blake sorting nails and mixing paint. Nathan couldn't hide his surprise. "I wasn't born in a corner office," she replied dryly. "Worked my way through undergrad, waited tables through MBA program. The polished executive image came much later." Nathan realized how little he actually knew about her background, having assumed a privileged path to success. "I didn't know." "Why would you?" "I cultivated a specific persona. Self-made but sophisticated. Approachable but authoritative. The perfect balance to inspire confidence in wealthy investors." "And the real Eleanor," she poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks skyward. "I sometimes wonder if she still exists. The performance becomes reality eventually." "She exists," Nathan said with certainty. "She's building shelters and finding food on this island. The corporate mask wouldn't have survived the crash." Eleanor considered this, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps you're right, though I'm not entirely sure I know who I am without Blake Financial defining me." "That's the silver lining of disasters," Nathan observed. "They strip away everything except what's essential. You discover who you really are when all the titles and trappings disappear." "And who are you, Nathan Reed, when all that's stripped away?" He hadn't expected the question to be turned back on him. "Someone who adapts, who helps where he can, who values connections over achievements, I suppose." "Admirable qualities," Eleanor said quietly. "Qualities I may have undervalued in my pursuit of success." The conversation lapsed into comfortable silence, both contemplating how dramatically their perceptions of each other had evolved in mere days. The rigid professional boundaries that had once defined their interaction now seemed absurdly artificial in the face of their shared struggle for survival. The next morning, Nathan woke to find Eleanor already outside, attempting to spear fish in the shallows with a sharpened stick. Her focused determination, face set in concentration, movements deliberate, reflected the same intensity she brought to boardroom negotiations. "Any luck?" he called, approaching the water's edge. She held up a small fish triumphantly. "Third attempt, not exactly sushi grade, but it's protein." Nathan grinned. "Impressive, from quarterly reports to spearfishing in less than a week." "Diversification of skills is good business practice," she replied with mock seriousness, then laughed, a sound he'd rarely heard during their professional relationship. They spent the morning improving their food-gathering techniques, Eleanor proving surprisingly adept at adapting business strategies to survival challenges. By midday, they had accumulated a respectable collection of fish, fruits, and coconuts. As they worked side by side preparing their findings, Nathan noticed Eleanor periodically scanning the horizon, her expression briefly falling when no aircraft or vessels appeared. "They're still looking," he assured her, recognizing her concern. "It's been 5 days," she replied, voice tight with controlled emotion. "Standard search procedures typically scale back after 72 hours. Blake Financial has resources influence. Nathan reminded her, using her own previous arguments. They won't give up easily. Eleanor nodded, though doubt lingered in her expression. I keep thinking about those documents. If Richard has been manipulating financial reports, you'll handle it when we return, Nathan said with confidence. If, she corrected quietly, the word heavy with growing uncertainty. That afternoon, Eleanor's ankle, still weak from her previous injury, gave way as she navigated slippery rocks near their water source. Nathan heard her cry of pain and rushed to find her sitting, face pale, examining the swollen joint. Let me see, he said, kneeling beside her. The ankle was significantly swollen, already bruising. Can you move it? She attempted rotation, wincing sharply. Barely. Possible sprain. We need to elevate and compress it. Without hesitation, he lifted her one arm behind her back, the other under her knees. Put your arms around my neck. Eleanor complied, though he felt her momentary stiffness. Physical proximity, clearly unfamiliar territory for her. He carried her carefully back to their shelter, setting her gently on the raised sleeping platform they'd constructed. This is unnecessary, she protested weakly. I could have managed. Professional pride is a luxury we can't afford here, Nathan replied, elevating her ankle on a folded aircraft blanket. He soaked a cloth in cool water, wrapping it around the swollen joint. Better to accept help than worsen an injury through stubbornness. Eleanor watched him tend to her ankle, an unreadable expression crossing her features. You're very good at this, taking derailment of people. Learned from necessity, my father's illness required practical skills. Her eyes softened with unexpected compassion. That must have been difficult, going from son to caretaker. It was, Nathan admitted, surprised by her insight. Still is. The role reversal is challenging. Is that why you took the assistant position? The practical skills translated well. He hadn't considered the parallel before, but her observation held truth. Maybe, though I prefer thinking of myself as your executive assistant rather than caretaker. And yet here you are tending my injuries again. Eleanor's tone held no criticism, only quiet acknowledgement. Different context, Nathan replied. Here we take care of each other. That's how survival works. The simple statement seemed to affect her deeply. She remained silent as he finished wrapping her ankle, her expression contemplative. Thank you, she said finally. Not just for this, but for everything since the crash. I wouldn't have survived alone. Neither would I, Nathan answered honestly. Cooperation multiplies survival chances exponentially. Always the practical analyst, Eleanor observed with a slight smile. Says the woman who organized our supplies by utility rating. Her smile widened, acknowledging the gentle teasing. This easy banter, so far removed from their formal workplace interactions, had developed naturally over their days together, another measure of their evolving relationship. As evening approached, Nathan prepared their modest meal while Eleanor rested her ankle. He noticed her shivering slightly, despite the tropical climate. Are you cold? He asked, concerned. A little. She wrapped her arms around herself. Probably just tired. Nathan touched her forehead, gently, alarm registering at the unnatural heat. You're burning up. Her eyes seemed overly bright, skin flushed. I'm fine, just need rest. You have a fever. Nathan's concern deepened. The ankle injury might be infected, or you could have picked up something from the water. Eleanor's condition deteriorated rapidly over the next few hours. Her temperature climbed, skin alternating between burning heat and cold sweats. Nathan monitored her with growing anxiety, applying cool compresses and encouraging her to sip water. By nightfall, she was delirious, murmuring disconnected phrases about meetings and financial projections, occasionally calling out names Nathan didn't recognize. He remained at her side, continuously bathing her forehead, neck, and wrists with cool water. Stay with me, Eleanor, he urged when her breathing became shallow and rapid. You need to fight this. In a moment of lucidity, her eyes focused on his face. Nathan, she whispered, voice barely audible. If I don't make it, don't. He cut her off firmly. You're not going anywhere. She grasped his hand with surprising strength. Listen to me. If I die here, no one will remember who I really was. Just the CEO, the business achievements. Tears welled in her eyes, a vulnerability he'd never witnessed before. I don't want to die alone, remembered only for what I did not, who I was. The raw honesty of her fear struck Nathan profoundly. You're not alone, he promised, squeezing her hand. And I see who you are. The real Eleanor. Strong, adaptable, brilliant beyond just business. I see you. Her eyes held his for a long moment before fever clouded them again, pulling her back into delirium. Throughout the night, Nathan maintained his vigil, refusing to leave her side even when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. Near dawn, her fever broke suddenly. Nathan, who had been dozing despite his best efforts, woke to find Eleanor watching him, her gaze clear, temperature noticeably lower. You stayed, she observed, a voice weak but coherent. Of course, the alternative had never occurred to him. She studied his face, haggard from the sleepless night, concern etched in every feature. You truly see me, don't you? The question seemed to carry weight beyond its simple words, as though she were asking something far more profound, about recognition, about being known for one's true self, rather than external accomplishments. Yes, he answered simply, I do. Something shifted in her expression, a barrier falling, a decision made. I'm beginning to see you too, Nathan. Really see you. And I've been blind for too long. The admission created a moment of connection deeper than anything they had shared before, a recognition of mutual humanity that transcended their former roles. In the soft morning light, with defenses lowered by illness and exhaustion, they were simply a man and a woman who had discovered each other through adversity. Eleanor recovered gradually over the following days, her strength returning incrementally. Nathan maintained their camp alone during her convalescence, ensuring fresh water, food, and signal fires remained established. On the seventh day after the crash, Eleanor was well enough to sit outside their shelter, observing, as Nathan constructed a more elaborate water filtration system using sand charcoal from their fire and aircraft debris. Your talents are wasted as an assistant, she commented, watching his methodical process. He glanced up, smiling slightly. I've been trying to tell you that for months. I should have listened. Regret tinged her voice. I was too focused on what you could do for me, not what you could contribute to the company. Water under the bridge. Nathan tested the filter, satisfied as clean liquid dripped through. Or over the filter in this case. Eleanor laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her features. Nathan realized he had heard her laugh more in the past week than in 11 months of employment. When we return, she said, the qualification significant. When, not if. Things will be different. Different how? He sat beside her, offering freshly filtered water. I've been thinking about company restructuring, creating a small business division, consulting for startups and emerging enterprises. She sipped the water, watching him over the rim. Someone with your background and practical problem-solving skills would make an excellent division head. Nathan stared at her, processing the implications. Are you offering me a promotion here now? Why not? I've seen your capabilities firsthand. Your business degree, combined with practical experience and demonstrated crisis management. She gestured to their surroundings. This island has been the most thorough job interview imaginable. The offer was unexpected, generous, and somehow disappointing. Nathan realized with sudden clarity that he was no longer certain he wanted to return to Blake Financial in any capacity. The island had changed him, clarified priorities he'd long suppressed beneath practical necessities. I'm not sure that's what I want anymore, he admitted. Eleanor's expression registered surprise, then thoughtful consideration. What do you want, Nathan, beyond survival? Beyond this island? What future would you choose? The question demanded honesty he hadn't fully acknowledged even to himself. I want simplicity, purpose, connection, not status or corporate advancement. He met her eyes directly. This experience has stripped away pretense. I don't want to rebuild those walls when we return. Understanding dawned in her expression, perhaps recognition of similar revelations she'd experienced during their ordeal. The person we become in crisis is often our truest self, she observed quietly. I've learned that here too. Their conversation was interrupted by a glint on the horizon. Metal reflecting sunlight. Nathan stood abruptly, shading his eyes against the glare. Aircraft, he said, heart racing, coming this direction. Eleanor rose beside him in excitement and something like apprehension mingling in her expression. The signal fire. I'll get it, Nathan interrupted, already moving toward the prepared kindling near the shore. Within minutes, thick black smoke rose from the beach, creating a visible marker against the blue sky. The aircraft, a Coast Guard seaplane, banked her toward their signal, circling lower to confirm human presence. Eleanor and Nathan waved frantically, relief and complex emotions surging through both as rescue materialized after a week of isolation. As the plane descended toward the calm waters offshore, Eleanor turned to Nathan, an unexpected intensity in her gaze. Before they arrive, before we return to reality, I need to say something. Nathan waited, sensing the importance of her words. This island changed everything, she said quietly. How I see myself, how I see you, what matters most. I don't want to lose that clarity when we go back. We won't, Nathan assured her, though uncertainty colored his conviction. The real world awaited with all its complexities and expectations. People like us don't normally. Eleanor hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. The age difference, the professional relationship, society has opinions about such things. Nathan realized with sudden clarity what she was trying to express. The connection that had grown between them, transcending their former roles, creating possibility neither had anticipated. Society isn't stranded here, he said simply. Just us, two people who've seen each other at their worst and their best. Whatever happens next should be our decision, no one else's. Relief softened her features. Yes, exactly that. The seaplane touched down on the water, taxiing toward shore. Rescue personnel emerged, wading through shallow water towards them. Their week of isolation was ending, the real world reaching in to reclaim them. Eleanor's hand found Nathan's fingers, intertwining with quiet certainty. Whatever comes next, she said softly, we face it together. The simple touch conveyed more than elaborate declarations could have, promised connection and the shared understanding that their island experience had fundamentally altered who they were both individually and to each other. Whatever challenges awaited beyond their sanctuary, the transformation they had undergone could not be undone. As rescue personnel approached, Nathan squeezed her hand gently, a silent affirmation of her words. Together they stepped forward to meet their rescuers and the uncertain future that awaited them beyond their island refuge. The Coast Guard seaplane cut through the crystalline waters with surgical precision, sending ripples across the previously untouched bay. Nathan and Eleanor stood side by side on the shore, the smoke from their signal fire still spiraling skyward. 7 days of isolation had transformed them both. Sunburned, disheveled, their corporate attire reduced to tattered remnants. Yet something in their posture had changed. A quiet confidence, and a unity that hadn't existed before the crash. The rescue team approached with professional efficiency, wading through shallow water. Their leader, a weathered man with silver-streaked hair, and the name Captain Reeves embroidered on his uniform, reached them first. Eleanor Blake and Nathan Reed. His eyes scanned them for visible injuries. We've had search teams combing a 200-mile radius for days. You're a long way off your filed flight plan. Eleanor stepped forward, her CEO persona partially resurfacing. The storm forced a significant course deviation. Our pilots didn't survive the crash. Captain Reeves nodded solemnly. We found the cockpit section 2 miles offshore. I'm sorry about your crew. He gestured toward the waiting seaplane. Let's get you both checked out and back to civilization. As they waded toward the aircraft, Nathan felt Eleanor hesitate. He glanced back to see her staring at their makeshift camp, the shelter they'd constructed, the remains of their morning fire. It feels strange, she murmured, voice barely audible above the lapping waves. Leaving it all behind. Nathan understood perfectly. This island had been their entire world, a place of transformation, revelation, and unexpected connection. Abandoning it felt like leaving a piece of themselves behind. We take what matters with us, he replied quietly. The Coast Guard medic, a young woman with efficient movements, examined them both on the flight back to Miami. Eleanor's ankle required proper medical attention, and both showed signs of mild dehydration and sunburn, but considering their ordeal, they had fared remarkably well. Blake Financial has representatives waiting at the hospital, Captain Reeves informed them as the Miami skyline appeared on the horizon. They've been coordinating with us since your disappearance was reported. Eleanor nodded, but Nathan noticed her knuckles whitening as she gripped the armrest. The world they were returning to held complications beyond physical recovery. Corporate responsibilities, potential financial fraud, and the uncertain nature of their transformed relationship. You ready for this? Nathan asked softly, aware of the Coast Guard crew within earshot. Eleanor's gaze remained fixed on the approaching cityscape. 7 days ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. She turned to him, vulnerability and resolve mingling in her expression. Now I know better than to pretend certain. The seaplane touched down in Biscayne Bay, where ambulances and a cluster of dark SUVs awaited their arrival. As they taxied toward the dock, Eleanor squared her shoulders, the physical transformation remarkable. Even in torn clothing, she reclaimed something of her executive bearing, armor being reassembled piece by piece. Blake Financial representative's hospital staff likely pressed beyond the security perimeter. She assessed, scanning the dock. We need a strategy. Nathan recognized her retreat into professional analysis, a defense mechanism against the overwhelming transition back to civilization. Simple strategy, medical attention, first minimal statements, delay detailed debriefing until tomorrow. She nodded gratefully. Together. The question contained layers of meaning beyond their immediate situation. Nathan squeezed her hand briefly. Together. The moment their seaplane docked, chaos erupted. Medical personnel rushed forward with stretchers they didn't need. Dark-suited executives from Blake Financial swarmed around Eleanor, creating a protective bubble that instinctively excluded Nathan. Camera flashes pulsed from beyond the security barriers where press had gathered, shouting questions about their survival. A tall man with steel gray hair pushed through the crowd, his expensive suit marking him as someone accustomed to authority. Richard Winters, Blake Financial's CFO, the same man Eleanor had argued with before their departure, whose financial manipulations had concerned her on the island. Eleanor, thank God you're alive. Richard embraced her with practiced concern that didn't reach his calculating eyes. We've been sick with worry. Nathan watched Eleanor's body language, the subtle stiffening, the professional mask sliding completely into place. Richard, I appreciate the company's search efforts. Richard's gaze flickered to Nathan, dismissive recognition crossing his features. Reed, good to see you survived as well. He turned immediately back to Eleanor. The board is assembling an emergency meeting tomorrow. There are pressing matters requiring your immediate attention. Nathan found himself systematically separated from Eleanor by the efficient choreography of corporate handlers. A different medical team escorted him to a separate ambulance, a different hospital route planned. Someone from HR appeared at his side, Amanda Chen, who managed executive staff. Nathan, we're so relieved you're safe. Her professional smile revealed nothing. We've arranged for you to receive comprehensive care at Mercy Hospital. Your father has been notified of your recovery. Nathan tried to maintain visual contact with Eleanor as the crowd between them thickened. I should stay with Ms. Blake. We've been through the ordeal together, and Ms. Blake has her own medical team and security detail, Amanda interrupted smoothly. Company protocol for executives. You'll have time to debrief later. The last glimpse Nathan caught of Eleanor showed her surrounded by executives, Richard's hand firmly guiding her toward the lead vehicle, her expression now unreadable behind the professional mask she'd perfected over years. The connection that had seemed so profound on their island suddenly appeared fragile in the face of corporate reality. Mercy Hospital provided excellent care but felt sterile and impersonal after the raw authenticity of island survival. Doctors confirmed Nathan's self-diagnosis of mild dehydration and treated his various cuts and abrasions. The physical separation from Eleanor created a hollow sensation he hadn't anticipated, as though a vital component of his recovery was missing. His father called, voice breaking with emotion. They told me you'd crashed, that no one could have survived. The wet cough that punctuated his relief was worse than Nathan remembered. I thought I'd lost you, son. Nathan closed his eyes, guilt washing over him. I'm sorry you worried, Dad. I'm okay. How are you doing? Has Aunt Meredith been staying with you? Don't worry about me. When are you coming home? Nathan hesitated, realizing he had no clear answer. The hospital wanted to keep him overnight for observation. Beyond that, uncertainty loomed. Soon, I promise. There's just some things I need to handle first. After the call ended, Nathan stared at the ceiling of his private room, courtesy of Blake Financial's premium insurance. The contrast between hospital luxury and island simplicity couldn't have been more stark. Their survival had clarified priorities, stripped away pretense. Here, complexity already began reasserting itself. His phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. Secure line. It's E. Are you all right? We need to talk before tomorrow's board meeting. Trust no one at the office yet. The message confirmed his suspicions. Eleanor suspected Richard's financial manipulations were more widespread than initially thought. Nathan responded immediately. "I'm at Mercy Hospital overnight. Room 412. Security here seems minimal." 3 hours later, long after visiting hours had ended, his door opened quietly. Eleanor entered transformed from the island survivor he'd known. Her hair was professionally styled, designer clothing replaced the tattered remains of her suit makeup, concealed the lingering sunburn. Only her eyes remained unchanged, direct and clear, holding his gaze with the same intensity they had shared on the island. "You look," Nathan gestured vaguely at her corporate restoration, "like I didn't just spend a week stranded on an island." Eleanor's smile held irony. Amazing at what a team of professionals can accomplish in 3 hours. She moved to his bedside, her expression softening. "How are you feeling?" "Physically fine, otherwise?" He shrugged. "Disoriented? Everything here feels strangely artificial after the island." She nodded, understanding immediately. "I know exactly what you mean. I've spent the afternoon being briefed on stock fluctuations and market reactions to our disappearance, and all I could think was how meaningless it seemed compared to finding fresh water or building shelter." "Have you spoken with Richard about the financial discrepancies?" Eleanor's expression hardened. "Not yet. I needed to assess the situation first." She withdrew a tablet from her designer bag. "The financial documents we found on the island were just the beginning. Look at these." Nathan examined the spreadsheets. She displayed his business education, allowing him to recognize sophisticated accounting manipulation. He's been systematically overvaluing assets, hiding liabilities. For how long? At least 18 months from what I've been able to piece together. Eleanor's voice remained steady, but fury simmered beneath. "He used my absence to accelerate the process, probably assuming we wouldn't return to expose him. You'll need concrete proof before confronting him. The board will require—" "I have it." Eleanor's eyes flashed with determination. "Before our flight, I'd authorized a comprehensive external audit starting next week. Richard didn't know. That's what our argument was about. He was trying to delay any outside examination of the books." Nathan connected the pieces. So the crash wasn't just bad luck. It was convenient timing for him. Eleanor's expression turned grim. "Too convenient, perhaps. I've requested the NTSB to thoroughly examine the aircraft remains. Mechanical failure seems suspiciously fortuitous for someone with millions to lose if discovered." The implication hung heavily between them. Nathan felt coldness spread through his chest. "You think he might have sabotaged the plane? That's a significant leap from financial fraud to attempted murder. People have killed for far less than the 40 million he stood to lose." Eleanor's voice was flat. "I'm not making accusations without evidence, but I've learned not to underestimate human capacity for self-preservation at any cost." The hospital room's sterile quiet felt suddenly oppressive. The idea that their island ordeal might have been deliberately engineered transformed their survival into something even more profound. Not just triumph over natural disaster, but escape from calculated elimination. "What's your next move?" Nathan asked. "Tomorrow's board meeting. I present the evidence, remove Richard from his position, and initiate full disclosure to the SEC." Eleanor's strategy was characteristically direct. The company will take a significant hit, but transparency now prevents complete collapse later. "And us?" The question emerged before Nathan could reconsider. "Where do we stand in all this?" Eleanor's professional veneer softened. She reached for his hand, the gesture reminiscent of their connection on the island, yet somehow more significant in this sterile hospital setting. "That's actually why I came tonight. Not just about Richard." She took a deep breath. "The board expects certain things. Stability, leadership, appropriate public relations. Our connection complicates that narrative." Nathan felt her slipping away, corporate reality reasserting its dominance over island authenticity. "So we pretend nothing changed, return to CEO and assistant?" "No." The firmness in Eleanor's voice surprised him. "I won't pretend the island didn't happen, but we need to be strategic about how we proceed." She squeezed his hand. "The company is watching for signs of trauma, psychological impairment, anything that might suggest I'm not fit to remain in leadership. A suddenly announced relationship with my much younger assistant would feed directly into that narrative." The practical logic was undeniable, yet disappointment still settled in Nathan's chest. You're asking for time. I'm asking for patience while I secure my position and expose Richard. Once that's accomplished, we can— She hesitated, unfamiliar territory even for her decisive nature. We can explore what's real between us without corporate politics undermining both our futures. Before Nathan could respond, his phone buzzed with another message. The blood drained from his face as he read it. What is it? Eleanor leaned forward, concern evident. My aunt. My father's been rushed to the hospital. His condition is deteriorating rapidly. Nathan was already disconnecting from the monitoring equipment, reaching for his clothes. I need to get to New York immediately. Eleanor nodded, immediately shifting to action mode. I'll arrange the company jet. It can have you there within 2 hours. Eleanor, your board meeting will proceed as planned. Her expression brooked no argument. Family comes first, Nathan. The island taught us that much, at least. Go to your father. The Blake Financial jet received special clearance for immediate departure from Miami. Throughout the flight, Nathan alternated between anxiety for his father and processing Eleanor's revelations about Richard. The dual crisis created a surreal disconnect. Personal emergency colliding with corporate conspiracy. Landing at LaGuardia, Nathan found a car waiting, arranged by Eleanor. The driver delivered him directly to New York Presbyterian, where his Aunt Meredith waited in the ICU waiting room, her face etched with worry. He asked for you constantly while you were missing, she said, embracing him tightly. It took a toll on his already weak system. When they announced you'd been found alive, he rallied briefly, then collapsed. The doctor's assessment was blunt but compassionate: end-stage pulmonary fibrosis complicated by pneumonia. The next 24 to 48 hours are critical. He's conscious but weak. You can see him now. His father looked diminished in the hospital bed, oxygen mask obscuring much of his face, monitoring equipment, creating a technological cocoon around his frail form. When Nathan entered, his eyes opened, recognition bringing momentary strength. You came back. His voice was barely audible beneath the mask. Nathan moved to his bedside, taking his father's hand gently. Of course I did. I told you I would. His father's eyes studied him intently. You're different. Something changed out there. Even at death's door, his father's perceptiveness remained intact. Nathan nodded, not bothering to hide the truth. Everything changed. I found clarity. A weak smile formed beneath the oxygen mask. About time. You've been lost longer than 7 days, son. The simple observation struck Nathan with unexpected force. His father was right. He had been lost, drifting through responsibilities and obligations, his true aspirations submerged beneath practical necessities. The island hadn't changed him so much as revealed what had been buried. I'm not going back to Blake Financial, Nathan said, the decision crystallizing as he spoke. Not as an assistant, not in any role. His father's eyes reflected understanding. Good. Never did suit you fetching coffee for people who couldn't see your worth. His breathing became more labored, each word requiring effort. What will you do instead? Something that matters, something real. The answer lacked specifics but contained certainty Nathan hadn't felt in years. His father nodded slightly, eyes drifting closed. That's my boy. Through the night, Nathan maintained vigil by his father's bedside. Nurses came and went, adjusting medications, checking vitals. In the sterile quiet broken only by the rhythm of machines, Nathan's thoughts turned repeatedly to Eleanor. The board meeting would be underway by now, her confrontation with Richard unfolding without him. Near dawn, his father's condition stabilized slightly. Nathan stepped into the hallway to check his phone, finding multiple missed calls and messages from Eleanor. The earliest timestamp during her board meeting. Evidence presented. Richard suspended pending investigation. Board supporting full disclosure to SEC. The next message sent 3 hours later. Richard trying to spin narrative that island trauma affected my judgment, attempting to rally faction against me. The final message sent just 30 minutes ago. How is your father and you press becoming problem here? Need to talk when you can. Nathan called immediately despite the early hour. Eleanor answered on the first ring, suggesting she hadn't slept. Nathan, how's your father? Stabilized for now. The next day or two will tell. Nathan moved further down the hospital corridor, seeking privacy. What's happening there? Richard is fighting back, claiming I'm experiencing post-traumatic stress, that my accusations stem from paranoia rather than evidence. Her voice tightened with controlled anger. He's rallied 3 board members to his side, pushing for a psychological evaluation before any external investigation proceeds. Can he really block the SEC investigation? Not ultimately, but he can delay it, create doubt about my leadership, potentially force me out before the truth emerges. Eleanor sounded exhausted but determined. I need the original documents we found on the island. They contain Richard's own notations that directly contradict his current claims. Nathan felt cold realization spread through him. The documents we left on the island, in our rush to leave, we never collected them. Silence stretched between them as implications settled. Those documents represented crucial evidence in Eleanor's fight against Richard's manipulation. The Coast Guard retrieval team might have collected them, Nathan suggested hopefully. Already checked. They focused on medical evacuation, not evidence gathering. Eleanor's strategist mind worked audibly. I need those documents, Nathan. Without them, it's my word against Richard's, and he's poisoning the well effectively. You need to return to the island. The conclusion was inevitable. I need us to return to the island, she corrected. You know exactly where we stored those documents. I can't risk missing them in an unfamiliar location. Nathan glanced toward his father's room, conflict tearing through him. Eleanor, my father is critical. I can't leave him now. Her silence acknowledged the impossible choice. I understand. Family comes first. The echo of her earlier statement carried genuine support. I'll find another solution. But even as she offered release, Nathan recognized the magnitude of what was at stake. Richard's fraud involved millions, affected countless investors, employees, and clients. If he succeeded in discrediting Eleanor and burying the evidence, the consequences would extend far beyond corporate politics. Let me talk to the doctors, get a clearer timeline on my father's condition. Nathan made no promises, but left possibility open. Call me after you've spoken with the recovery team about transport options. As he ended the call, Nathan felt the weight of competing responsibilities pressing down. His father needed him here. Eleanor needed him on the island. Both represented commitments that defined who he was becoming in the aftermath of their shared ordeal. The attending physician offered cautious optimism during morning rounds. He's responding to the antibiotics. If this continues, we should see significant improvement within 36-48 hours. The doctor's expression remained guarded. That said, the underlying condition remains terminal. We're buying time, not changing the ultimate outcome. The harsh reality twisted in Nathan's chest. His father was dying. Not immediately, but inevitably. The question became not if he would lose him, but when and what would happen in the precious time remaining. When Nathan returned to the room, his father was awake, more lucid than he'd been since Nathan's arrival. You're hovering, his father observed, voice stronger, though still raspy. Never a good sign. Nathan attempted a smile, just concerned. His father's gaze remained sharp despite his physical decline. You need to be somewhere else. I can see it written all over you. The perception startled Nathan. Dad, I'm exactly where I need to be. Bull. His father adjusted himself slightly against the pillows. Something's pulling at you. Something important. Tell me. Nathan hesitated, then explained the situation with Eleanor Richards' financial fraud and the crucial documents left on the island. His father listened without interruption, oxygen mask temporarily set aside. So she needs you to go back to the island, his father concluded, and you're torn because of me. I'm not leaving you. Nathan's tone brooked no argument. His father studied him for a long moment. You know what I regret most about my life? The chances I didn't take. The times I chose safety over meaning. He reached for Nathan's hand. Don't use me as an excuse to hide from what matters. Dad, you're critically ill. That's not hiding, that's life, son. Messy, complicated, never giving us clean choices. His father's grip tightened with surprising strength. I'm not going anywhere in the next couple of days. These doctors have me locked down tighter than Fort Knox. But that woman needs you now. And from what you've told me, a lot of innocent people will suffer if this Richard character gets away with his scheme. Nathan felt torn between admiration for his father's selflessness and reluctance to leave his bedside. I can't just abandon you. It's not abandonment if I'm pushing you out the door. His father's familiar stubbornness emerged through his illness. Go get those documents, help her stop this fraud, Then come back and tell me all about it. That's what will help me recover faster than any medicine they're pumping into me." After another hour of discussion and securing promises from both his aunt and the medical team to call immediately with any change, Nathan made his decision. He called Eleanor, who answered immediately. "I can go, for 24 hours maximum. My father's stabilized, but I need to be back quickly." Eleanor's relief was audible. "Thank you, Nathan. The recovery team has arranged transport. Seaplane leaves from LaGuardia's marine terminal in 2 hours. I'm already en route from Miami." 12 hours after leaving the island, Nathan found himself returning, circumstances dramatically transformed. The Coast Guard seaplane that delivered them was smaller than their evacuation aircraft, with just enough room for Nathan, Eleanor, and a 2-person recovery team specializing in evidence collection. Eleanor had arrived looking nothing like either the polished CEO or the island survivor. Instead, she wore practical hiking clothes, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, face free of makeup. The corporate armor had been deliberately shed for this mission. "Richard's allies are watching my every move," she explained as they boarded. "I told them I needed time off for medical follow-up. My assistant director is covering the immediate crisis management." The flight to the island passed mostly in silence, both processing the strange circularity of their journey. When the familiar coastline appeared below, Nathan felt an unexpected surge of emotion. Not quite homecoming, but recognition of a place that had fundamentally altered his life's trajectory. They landed in the same bay where they'd been rescued, the aircraft anchoring offshore. Eleanor surveyed the beach, her expression complex. "Strange how familiar it feels, like we never left." The island itself appeared unchanged, indifferent to their absence. Their signal fire had been extinguished by rain or wind, but its charred remains still marked the shore. The path they had cleared to their camp remained visible, though already beginning to be reclaimed by vegetation. "The documents were in the secondary shelter, correct?" Eleanor verified as they waded ashore. "In your waterproof emergency kit." Nathan nodded, leading the way inland. The Coast Guard recovery specialist followed at a respectful distance, carrying collection equipment, but allowing them to navigate the terrain they knew intimately. Their camp appeared both familiar and abandoned, like revisiting a childhood home years later. The shelter remained mostly intact, though a recent rainfall had collapsed one section of the roof. Their carefully organized supplies lay scattered by wildlife investigation. "It's only been 5 days," Eleanor observed, surveying the changes. "Yet it feels like returning to ancient ruins." Nathan moved directly to the rear of the shelter, where he'd stored the emergency kit, a waterproof container salvaged from the aircraft. Relief flooded through him as he located it, still sealed against the elements. Inside, protected from moisture and insects, lay the financial documents that could expose Richard's fraud. "Got them." Nathan carefully extracted the papers, handing them to Eleanor. "All here, including Richard's handwritten notations about concealing the asset overvaluation." Eleanor examined the documents, satisfaction and vindication evident in her expression. "This is everything we need. His own writing confirms knowledge and intent." She turned to the recovery team. "We need these properly documented and preserved as evidence." The specialist moved forward with evidence bags and photography equipment, beginning the process of documenting the discovery location and condition. While they worked, Nathan and Eleanor stepped away from the shelter, drawn instinctively toward the water source they had relied upon for survival. The small basin remained as they had left it, water still collecting naturally in the rock depression. Eleanor knelt beside it, running her fingers through the clear liquid. 7 days here changed everything," she said quietly. "More than 30 years in New York never accomplished." Nathan understood exactly what she meant. The island had stripped away pretense, reduced existence to essentials, revealed their true priorities and capacities. "The person we become in crisis is often our truest self," he echoed her words from days earlier. "I keep thinking about something my father said." Eleanor's voice remained soft, reflective. "When I was young, before success and divorce and corporate armor, he said, the measure of your life won't be what you accumulated, but what you gave away." She looked up at Nathan. "I've spent 20 years accumulating power, wealth, status. What have I given? Security to employees, investment to promising enterprises, mentorship to those who earned your respect." Nathan listed tangible contributions she might have overlooked. "You've always been more than just a CEO accumulating wealth." Eleanor smiled, gratitude warming her expression. "You've always seen more in me than I recognized in myself." They continued their circuit of the island, revisiting locations that had become significant during their week of survival: the cave that sheltered them during the storm, the fishing spot where Eleanor had caught her first fish, the fallen palm that had destroyed their initial shelter. The Coast Guard specialists completed their evidence collection efficiently, securing the documents and photographing the crash site for additional investigation. By mid-afternoon, they signaled readiness to depart. Standing on the beach where their ordeal had begun, Eleanor turned to Nathan, her expression conflicted. "Part of me doesn't want to leave. Isn't that strange after fighting so hard to serve an escape?" "Not strange at all." Nathan understood completely. Here everything was clear. Purpose was simple. Connection was authentic. And now we return to complexity, to Richard's manipulation, to public scrutiny and corporate politics. Eleanor's voice contained resignation, but also determination. Except this time we return with clarity we didn't have before. The seaplane journey back to New York reinforced the jarring transition between worlds. Eleanor spent much of the flight reviewing the recovered documents, preparing her strategy against Richard, occasionally consulting Nathan on business interpretations and implications. "These notations alone prove intent to deceive," she observed, indicating Richard's handwritten margin notes. "Combined with the original projections you prepared for the Henderson deal, they create an incontrovertible paper trail." Nathan recognized her retreat into strategic analysis, not abandonment of their connection, but necessary compartmentalization to address the immediate crisis. He respected her focus, contributing insights where helpful, otherwise giving her space to prepare for the confrontation ahead. As they approached New York, Eleanor finally set the documents aside, turning to face Nathan directly. "I need to ask you something important." Her serious tone captured his full attention. "Of course. When this is finished, when Richard is removed and the company stabilized, what do you want for yourself, for us, for your future?" The directness of her question was pure Eleanor. No evasion, no games. Nathan had been considering the same question since their rescue. "I want authenticity. The island showed me how much of my life was spent meeting others' expectations rather than following my own compass." He met her gaze steadily. "I can't return to being your assistant, Eleanor. Not because the role lacks value, but because it isn't my path." She nodded, no surprise in her expression. "I expected as much. Your talents were always wasted in that position. As for us," Nathan chose his words carefully, "what we found on the island was real. But it existed in isolation, literally and figuratively. We need to discover if it translates to the real world with all its complications and judgments. Complications like a 16-year age gap, like a former employer-employee relationship, like public scrutiny of a CEO dating a much younger man." Eleanor named the obstacles directly, characteristically confronting, rather than avoiding difficult truths. "Yes, all of that and more." Nathan appreciated her honesty. "I don't have answers, Eleanor. Just a willingness to explore the questions together once the immediate crises are resolved." Eleanor considered his response, analytical mind, visibly processing possibilities and implications. Finally, she reached across the space between them, taking his hand. "I can work with that. Exploration without guarantees." The simplicity of her acceptance, devoid of corporate calculation or emotional manipulation, reminded Nathan of why he had come to admire her so deeply on the island. Beneath the CEO persona existed a woman of remarkable clarity and courage. Landing at LaGuardia, they faced immediate separation again. Eleanor needed to return directly to Blake Financial headquarters with the evidence, while Nathan headed straight to the hospital to check on his father. "I'll call you after the board's emergency session," Eleanor promised as they parted on the tarmac. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Remember, the echo of their island promise carried them through the separation, a tether between their diverging paths. At New York Presbyterian, Nathan found his father's condition marginally improved. The pneumonia was responding to treatment, though the underlying fibrosis remained a terminal sentence. His father was awake and alert, eager for news. "So, did you find the smoking gun?" His voice remained weak but engaged. Nathan sat beside the bed, relief at seeing his father conscious, overwhelming him momentarily. "We did. Eleanor's presenting it to the board right now." His father studied him with perceptive eyes. "And what about you two? Something happened between you on that island, didn't it?" Nathan smiled faintly. "Nothing gets past you, does it?" I've had plenty of practice reading between your lines. His father's expression turned serious. She's quite a bit older, isn't she? And your boss. Was my boss, Nathan corrected, and yes, 16 years older. Does that bother you? His father considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. What matters is whether she sees you, the real you, not just what you can do for her. He adjusted his position, slightly wincing. Does she bow? Yes. Nathan's response came without hesitation. More clearly than anyone besides you. Then the rest is just details. His father's pragmatism cut through potential complications. Life's too short to let other people's opinions dictate your happiness. Trust me on that one. Their conversation was interrupted by Nathan's phone. Eleanor's name appeared on the screen. He answered immediately, putting the call on speaker at his father's insistent gesture. Nathan. Eleanor's voice carried tension, but also triumph. The board voted to remove Richard pending full investigation, 7-3. The SEC has been notified and external auditors are securing all financial records. That's excellent news. Nathan felt genuine relief knowing how many people Richard's fraud had potentially harmed. How did he take it? Not well. Eleanor's tone darkened. He's threatening lawsuits claiming defamation and corporate conspiracy. But the evidence is irrefutable, especially with the recovered documents. What happens next? Damage control. Stock price will take a significant hit when this becomes public. Some clients will withdraw funds. But transparency now prevents total collapse later. Eleanor's strategic mind had clearly mapped contingencies. I need to stay here through the initial crisis, at least several days of intensive management. Nathan understood the implied message. Her presence would be required at Blake Financial, while his remained at his father's bedside. The real world had reasserted its demands, pulling them in separate directions despite their Island Forge connection. Do what you need to do, he assured her. We'll find our way through this. After the call ended, his father regarded him thoughtfully. Complex woman, strong, reminds me a bit of your mother. The comparison surprised Nathan. His mother had passed when he was 14, but he remembered her quiet strength, her uncompromising honesty. I never made that connection before. Different worlds, similar souls. His father's observation carried the weight of experience. Don't let her corporate title fool you. Women like that don't define themselves by their positions. The next 48 hours unfolded in parallel crises. Nathan remained primarily at the hospital where his father's condition stabilized further, though doctors cautioned that his overall prognosis remained terminal. Meanwhile, Eleanor navigated the corporate earthquake triggered by Richard's exposure and removal. Their contact reduced to brief calls and text messages. Eleanor battled media speculation, client concerns, and regulatory inquiries. The financial press had seized on the story. Blake financial fraud scandal dominated business headlines, with Richard's arrest for securities fraud intensifying coverage. Secondary stories emerged focusing on Eleanor and Nathan's island survival, with tabloids particularly interested in their transformed relationship. CEO and assistant's island romance read one particularly sensational headline, accompanied by photos of them holding hands during their rescue. Nathan ignored the media circus, focusing instead on his father's care and considering his own future path. The clarity he'd found on the island remained, though translating it into practical decisions proved challenging. On the third evening after their return from the island, as Nathan sat reading beside his father's hospital bed, Eleanor appeared unexpectedly in the doorway. She looked exhausted, dark circles beneath her eyes visible, despite careful makeup, but her posture remained straight, her presence commanding even in fatigue. Eleanor. Nathan rose to greet her, surprised by her appearance after days of nonstop crisis management. I needed to step away from the madness. She approached his father's bed with respectful caution. You must be Mr. Reed. I'm Eleanor Blake. His father assessed her with the same perceptiveness he'd always directed toward Nathan's friends and girlfriends. The woman who survived an island with my son. Pleasure to finally meet you, though I wish circumstances were better. Likewise. Eleanor's customary confidence softened with genuine respect. Your son saved my life multiple times on that island. You raised an extraordinary man. His father's eyes crinkled with pride. I gave him the tools. What he built with them was his own doing. The three of them talked for nearly an hour, a conversation flowing naturally despite the unusual circumstances. Nathan observed with quiet amazement as his father and Eleanor developed immediate rapport, discussing everything from corporate ethics to fishing techniques they'd both learned in childhood. When his father eventually tired, Eleanor suggested they step out to allow him rest. In the hospital corridor, she finally allowed her exhaustion to show. "The company will survive," she reported, leaning against the wall. "Barely. Stock dropped 30%, but the transparency approach is working. Clients appreciate full disclosure instead of attempted cover-up. And Richard, facing multiple federal charges. He's cooperating now, hoping for leniency." Eleanor's expression hardened momentarily. "The investigation confirmed my suspicions about the plane. Maintenance records were falsified for our specific aircraft. Nothing conclusive, but significant circumstantial evidence suggesting deliberate sabotage." The confirmation of what they'd suspected sent a chill through Nathan. Their island ordeal hadn't been mere accident, but likely attempted murder, a desperate man's effort to silence Eleanor before she discovered his fraud. "Your father is remarkable," Eleanor observed, changing the subject to something less disturbing. "I see where you get your resilience and integrity. He's fighting hard." Nathan glanced toward the hospital room. "The doctors are more optimistic, but the underlying condition remains terminal. We're measuring in months now, not years." Eleanor touched his arm gently. "I'm so sorry, Nathan. I've had time to prepare for this. Years, really, but it never makes it easier." He covered her hand with his. "How long can you stay?" "I need to be back for the emergency shareholder meeting tomorrow morning." Regret colored her voice. "But I wanted to see you meet your father, remind myself what matters beyond balance sheets and stock prices." The island perspective. Nathan understood exactly what she meant. "Yes." Eleanor's gaze held his steadily. "I miss that clarity. Every day since our return, I've felt it slipping away beneath the demands of crisis management. It doesn't have to disappear completely." Nathan moved closer, the hospital corridor receding from awareness. "We carry what matters with us." Remember, Eleanor's professional composure softened vulnerability, emerging that few besides Nathan had ever witnessed. "I'm afraid, Nathan, not of Richard or financial fallout or media scrutiny. I'm afraid of losing what we found there, of becoming the cold, isolated person I was before." "That won't happen." But Nathan's certainty came from deep understanding of who she truly was beneath corporate armor. "The island didn't create something new in you, Eleanor. It revealed what was already there: strength, adaptability, capacity for connection. Those qualities don't disappear just because you're back in Manhattan." Eleanor studied his face, seeking reassurance. "How can you be so certain?" "Because I see you," Nathan replied simply. "The real Eleanor. Not just the CEO or the survivor, but the woman beneath both. I've always seen you even before the island stripped away the disguises." The truth of his words registered visibly. Eleanor moved forward, closing the remaining distance between them. In the sterile hospital corridor surrounded by the mechanics of healing and dying, she kissed him, not with the desperate intensity of island survival, but with deliberate certainty. A choice made with full awareness of its complications and consequences. When they separated, Eleanor's expression held newfound resolve. Whatever comes next, Richard's trial, corporate restructuring, media scrutiny, your father's illness, we face it together. Not as boss and assistant, not as island survivors, but as partners who see each other clearly. Partners. Nathan echoed the word, appreciating its implications of equality and mutual support. "I can work with that." As Eleanor departed for her shareholder meeting and Nathan returned to his father's bedside, the parallel crises in their lives continued unresolved. His father's illness progressed along its inevitable path. Blake Financial's recovery remained uncertain. Their relationship faced scrutiny from both corporate circles and tabloid media. Yet beneath these external challenges, something fundamental had shifted. The island experience had revealed essential truths about themselves and each other. Priorities clarified values, solidified connection, established on foundations stronger than professional roles or social expectations. The real world had reclaimed them with all its complexity and constraint, but they carried the island within. Its lessons, its revelations, and the unshakable certainty that when stripped to essentials, they had discovered something genuine and enduring in each other. 3 months after their rescue, autumn painted Central Park in vibrant hues of red and gold. Nathan sat on a bench near the reservoir watching joggers circle the water path as he waited. His father had insisted on the meeting despite his weakening condition. "Get out of that hospital room and breathe some actual air," he'd commanded with characteristic stubbornness. Nathan checked his watch. Eleanor was running 15 minutes late, unusual for someone who built her reputation on punctuality. The past months had created a new rhythm between them. Phone calls whenever possible, brief visits between her corporate responsibilities and his hospital vigil. Their connection endured despite external pressures, but true privacy remained elusive with media interest still simmering around the island survivors, as tabloids had dubbed them. A familiar figure appeared on the path, moving with purposeful strides. Eleanor had adapted her typically formal business attire, opting for a more casual elegance that suited their park meeting. Even from a distance, Nathan could see tension in her posture, something beyond her usual corporate intensity. She reached him slightly breathless. "Sorry I'm late. The board meeting ran long." "Everything okay?" Nathan stood immediately attuned to the subtle signs of distress she rarely displayed publicly. "The SEC investigation is expanding. They're examining transactions from before Richard's tenure as CFO. Eleanor's voice remained controlled, but concern etched lines around her eyes. "Which means potential issues predating my leadership." Nathan absorbed the implications. The company could face penalties beyond Richard's actions, potentially severe ones. Eleanor sat beside him, shoulders squared despite the burden. "The board is divided on how to proceed. Some want to fight, others to settle quickly, regardless of cost. And you? I want the truth, whatever it reveals." Her gaze swept across the park, settling on the distant skyline, where Blake Financial's headquarters stood among Manhattan's steel giants. "If systemic problems exist beyond Richard, I need to know. The company needs to know." This steadfast commitment to integrity had emerged as her guiding principle throughout the crisis: transparency, whatever the cost. Nathan recognized how the island experience had crystallized this approach, stripping away corporate political maneuvering in favor of fundamental values. "How's your father today?" Eleanor shifted focus, genuine concern replacing corporate worries. "Stable," insisting I needed fresh air and young company instead of hovering. Nathan smiled faintly at his father's transparent matchmaking efforts. "The home hospice team starts tomorrow. He's adamant about not dying in a hospital." Eleanor covered his hand with hers. "He's extraordinary, fighting while accepting reality simultaneously. Not many people manage that balance. He wants to meet with you again before—" Nathan's voice caught unexpectedly. "He said he has business matters to discuss." Curiosity flickered across Eleanor's face, but she simply nodded. "Of course, whenever he feels up to it." Their conversation meandered through personal and professional territories, updates on Nathan's search for new career directions, Eleanor's corporate reconstruction efforts, mundane details of daily life that created normalcy amid their extraordinary circumstances. When Eleanor's phone chimed with an incoming message, she checked it with a frown. The PR team just sent an advance copy of tomorrow's Wall Street Journal feature. Her expression tightened. "They've uncovered details about us we haven't publicly confirmed." Nathan tensed. Since their return, they'd maintained deliberate ambiguity about their relationship, neither confirming nor denying the tabloid speculation. This calculated distance protected Eleanor's professional authority during Blake Financial's crisis, while giving them space to define their connection on their own terms. "What kind of details?" "Quotes from the medical team about our unusually strong emotional bond during recovery. Speculation about shared trauma creating romantic attachment. Analysis from psychologists about survivor relationships and their typical trajectories." Eleanor's clinical recitation barely masked her irritation. "They're packaging our personal experience as a human interest sidebar to corporate fraud." The intrusion felt violating despite its predictability. "How do you want to handle it?" "We can't stop the story, but we can address it directly on our own terms before it breaks." She met his eyes directly. "I'm tired of hiding, Nathan, of calculating every public interaction to minimize corporate political damage. The island taught me life's impermanence too vividly for such waste." The declaration contained a proposal beyond media strategy. Nathan considered her words carefully. "Are you suggesting we go public officially?" "I'm suggesting we stop pretending our connection is a liability requiring management." Determination hardened her voice. Whatever exists between us deserves the dignity of acknowledgement, not strategic concealment. This moment represented a significant threshold crossing from private understanding to public declaration would fundamentally change their dynamic. The corporate world would scrutinize their 16-year age gap and former professional relationship through lenses of power propriety and potential impropriety. The board will question your judgment, Nathan noted, not as discouragement, but as practical reality they needed to address. Let them. I've delivered 27% stock recovery since Richard's removal. My judgment stands on its results. Eleanor's confidence reflected her strengthened position after months of crisis management. Besides, I'm tired of living as though island clarity was some temporary delusion rather than profound truth. Nathan recognized the familiar resolve that had emerged during their survival, the authentic core of Eleanor Blake, stripped of corporate pretense. Then we stop hiding, but on our terms, not theirs. Their strategy developed naturally as they walked the reservoir path. They would issue a simple statement, acknowledging their relationship had evolved through shared experience, neither apologizing for nor sensationalizing the connection. No exclusive interviews, no choreographed photo opportunities, dignity through straightforward acknowledgement. 3 days later, Nathan's father received Eleanor in the living room of his modest Queens apartment, now transformed into a hospice space. Oxygen equipment and medication schedules had become fixtures, but family photos and well-worn books maintained the essence of the man rapidly fading from his physical form. "Eleanor Blake," he greeted from his recliner, voice weaker but eyes still sharp. "Looking better than when you were stranded on that island." She smiled, taking the chair beside him. "As are you compared to our hospital meeting." "Generous lie. I appreciate that." He adjusted his position, conserving limited energy. "I asked you here for a reason beyond checking if you're good enough for my son." Eleanor's eyebrow raised slightly. "And have you reached a conclusion on that question?" "You'll do." The simple approval carried significant weight from a man so protective of his only child. "But that's not what I wanted to discuss." He gestured toward a folder on the side table. "Nathan mentioned you're restructuring Blake Financial, creating new divisions." "That's right, moving beyond traditional investment banking into more diversified financial services, including small business development." His question carried unusual intensity. Eleanor nodded. "That's one proposed division, providing capital and consultation to emerging businesses with growth potential but limited access to traditional financing." Nathan's father smiled with satisfaction. "Then I have something to offer you, my last gift to my son." He explained that before his illness progressed, he had developed a mathematical model for evaluating small business viability, a system combining traditional financial metrics with community impact factors and sustainability projections. As a community bank loan officer for 30 years before his illness, he had refined the approach through hundreds of cases. The big banks ignore businesses below certain capitalization thresholds. Their algorithms miss viable opportunities their analysts never see. His breathing grew labored with excitement, despite the oxygen support. "My system identifies potential overlooked by standard metrics. Tested it for years before getting sick. 92% accuracy in predicting 5-year survival." Eleanor leaned forward, professional interest clearly piqued. "You're offering this model to Blake Financial. I'm offering it to you as someone who might appreciate its value." His gaze shifted to Nathan. "With my son as implementation partner, should he choose that path. His business degree, plus my practical methodology, a powerful combination." The proposal hung in the air between them, not just a business opportunity, but a bridge connecting Eleanor's corporate world with Nathan's search for meaningful work, all anchored in his father's legacy. The elegance of its interconnections silenced them momentarily. "I'd need to evaluate the model rigorously," Eleanor finally said, professional caution tempering her evident interest. "Expected nothing less." He slid the folder toward her with trembling hands. "Full documentation inside. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere immediately." The gallows humor extracted reluctant smiles from both Nathan and Eleanor. After reviewing the materials together for an hour, Eleanor's analytical mind clearly recognized the system's potential. The conversation shifted to implementation possibilities. Nathan's potential role in integration with Blake Financial's restructuring plans. When his father's energy finally waned, Eleanor prepared to leave. At the door, he called her back for a private word, sending Nathan to retrieve additional documentation from the bedroom. Nathan returned to find Eleanor composed but emotional, his father wearing the satisfied expression of someone who had completed an important task. Neither shared the content of their exchange, but an unspoken understanding seemed to have formed between them. As they left the apartment, Eleanor turned to Nathan in the hallway. "Your father is giving us both extraordinary gifts. You a purpose honoring his life's work, me a competitive advantage in an untapped market. But most importantly, he's giving us a shared future path, should we choose to walk it together." The observation captured the multi-layered nature of his father's offering, practical, emotional, and powerfully connective across generations. 2 weeks later, Nathan stood beside his father's bed as sunrise painted the Queen's apartment in golden light. The hospice nurse had called at 4 a.m. "His vitals are dropping. If there's anyone who needs to say goodbye, now is the time." His father drifted between consciousness and something beyond, occasionally surfacing with startling lucidity. During one such moment, his eyes found Nathan's with unexpected clarity. "I've been thinking about the island," he whispered, voice barely audible above the oxygen equipment. Nathan leaned closer. "What about it, Dad?" "Everyone has an island waiting, a place that strips away everything but what matters." His breathing grew more labored with each word. "Mine was your mother's death. Yours was that crash. Different islands, same lesson." "What lesson?" Nathan asked softly. "That the path forward isn't about what you own or achieve. It's about who walks beside you when everything else disappears." His hands sought Nathan's grip, surprisingly firm despite his weakness. "I had 30 good years with your mother before my island. You have decades ahead with Eleanor after yours. Don't waste a single day on anything that wouldn't matter if you were stranded again." The wisdom struck Nathan with physical force, simple yet profound, distilling life's complexity to essential truth. Before he could respond, his father slipped back into unconsciousness, his breathing pattern changing subtly. 3 hours later, with morning light streaming through the windows and Eleanor having arrived to sit quietly with them, Nathan's father drew his final breath, peaceful, unburdened, complete. The funeral drew a surprisingly large gathering, former colleagues from the community bank, neighbors, extended family, and clients whose small businesses had flourished under his guidance. Nathan delivered the eulogy with Eleanor sitting in the front row, her presence a steady anchor amid his grief. "My father understood value better than anyone I've known," Nathan told the assembled mourners. "Not just financial value, but human value. The worth of connection, of purpose, of leaving something meaningful behind. He measured success not by accumulation, but by contribution." After the service, as attendees shared stories and memories at the reception, Eleanor found Nathan in a quiet corner, offering silent companionship rather than hollow condolences. When he finally spoke, his voice carried certainty rather than grief. "I'm ready to move forward with his model, to build something that honors his work while creating our own path." Eleanor studied him carefully. "You're sure grief sometimes pushes us toward decisions before we're truly ready?" "I've never been more certain of anything." Nathan met her gaze steadily. "The island taught us both that clarity often comes through loss. My father's death isn't pushing me towards something new. It's confirming what I already knew was right." 2 months later, as winter descended on Manhattan, Blake Financial announced the creation of a new division, Reed Community Capital, focusing on small business investment in underserved markets. The press release named Nathan Reed as division director, reporting directly to CEO Eleanor Blake, with the program utilizing proprietary evaluation methodology developed by banking veteran William Reed. Financial analysts questioned the strategic diversion from Blake Financial's traditional focus on large-scale investments. Industry publications speculated about nepotism and personal relationship dynamics influencing corporate direction. The board expressed concerns about allocating significant resources to unproven markets during ongoing recovery from Richard's fraud. Eleanor faced these challenges with the same unwavering clarity she demonstrated since the island. In the boardroom, at shareholder meetings, during press conferences, she consistently articulated both the ethical and financial rationale for the expansion. Nathan, meanwhile, assembled a team blending traditional financial analysts with community development specialists, implementing his father's methodology while expanding its application. 6 months into the initiative, Reed Community Capital had funded 27 small businesses across 5 states with early performance metrics exceeding projections. What began as skepticism gradually transformed into cautious industry interest, with competitors monitoring the experiment from a safe distance. On the one-year anniversary of their rescue, Nathan and Eleanor returned to their island. The Coast Guard provided transport as part of the final NTSB investigation into the crash, allowing them private time at the site while the team completed technical documentation. Standing on the beach where their ordeal began, the island appeared simultaneously familiar and foreign. Nature had reclaimed their campsite, erasing most traces of their presence. Only the most permanent markers remained: the crashed fuselage partially submerged offshore, the clearing where their shelter had stood, the rock basin that had provided life-sustaining water. Strange how something so pivotal in our lives has continued existing without us, Eleanor observed, scanning the coastline, as though our week here was insignificant to the island itself. Nathan understood her sentiment exactly. Humbling, isn't it? We experienced transformation, while the island experienced Tuesday. They retraced their survival journey, the water source, fishing spot, cave shelter, during the storm. At each location, memories surfaced with vivid clarity. Eleanor's first successful fish catch, Nathan carrying her through the storm, their shelter collapsing beneath the fallen palm. At the site of their final camp, where Eleanor had fought fever and voiced her deepest fear of dying unmourned, they sat together in contemplative silence. The jungle sounds created familiar background music, insects buzzing, distant birds calling, leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. "I've been thinking about what constitutes home," Eleanor finally said, voice quiet beneath nature's symphony. "For decades, I defined it through possession. My penthouse, my office spaces I owned but rarely inhabited emotionally." Nathan watched a colorful bird land on a nearby branch, its plumage iridescent in the dappled sunlight. "And now I understand home isn't geographic, it's relational." She met his gaze directly. "The island taught me that home exists wherever authentic connection happens, even in the most inhospitable circumstances." The insight resonated deeply with Nathan's own evolving perspective. His father's apartment, despite its modest furnishings, had contained more genuine home than many luxurious spaces he'd encountered. The island, for all its dangers, had offered a form of home through their growing connection. "I've been considering the penthouse," Eleanor continued, referencing her luxurious but sterile Manhattan residence. "It never felt truly inhabited, just owned and maintained, like a hotel suite I visited between meetings." Nathan nodded, understanding her unspoken question. Since his father's death, he'd maintained the Queen's apartment while gradually transitioning into his new role at Reed Community Capital. Their relationship had deepened through shared work and personal connection, but they had maintained separate residences, partly from practical necessity during his father's illness, partly from mutual desire to build relationship foundations beyond crisis circumstances. "Are you suggesting we find someplace new together?" The question contained implications beyond real estate. "I'm suggesting home is something we create rather than purchase." Eleanor's gaze swept across the island that had stripped away her corporate armor. "The address matters less than who shares it." The Coast Guard investigator approached before Nathan could respond, informing them they needed to depart within the hour as weather conditions were changing. As they made their way back to the beach, Eleanor paused at the rock basin that had provided their water. "I've been carrying a question for months," she said, running her fingers through the clear liquid as she had during their survival. "One I've hesitated to ask because timing never seemed right." Nathan waited, sensing the significance of her uncharacteristic hesitation. "Your father spoke to me privately that day before he died. He said something I've reflected on constantly since." Eleanor's typically confident voice contained unfamiliar vulnerability. "He told me, when you find someone who sees you clearly, through both success and struggle, who values who you are rather than what you've built, that's the rarest treasure in life. Don't let fear of judgment steal it from you." The words sounded exactly like his father, direct, insightful, cutting through pretense to essential truth. Nathan felt simultaneous grief and gratitude. Hearing wisdom he had never had the chance to thank his father for sharing. Eleanor continued, "He then asked if I was prepared to build a life where professional achievement wasn't the primary measure of success. If I could embrace partnership rather than authority as my fundamental relationship model." Her eyes held Nathan's steadily. Important questions I've been considering carefully. The air between them seemed to still island sounds receding as significance crystallized. And have you reached conclusions? Yes. Eleanor stood facing him directly. I want partnership with you, Nathan. Not just professional collaboration or romantic connection, but true partnership across all dimensions. Sharing home-building legacy facing whatever islands life places in our path. The declaration, characteristic in its directness, while revolutionary in its content, represented complete transformation from the isolated armored CEO he'd met a year earlier. Nathan recognized the courage required for someone so fiercely independent to voice such vulnerability. Traditional proposals typically involve rings rather than island metaphors. He observed with gentle humor, acknowledging the marriage proposal embedded within her broader invitation to shared life. When have we ever been traditional? Eleanor's smile contained both confidence and uncharacteristic nervousness. Besides, I thought this location carried appropriate symbolism. Nathan closed the distance between them, taking both her hands in his. My father was right, seeing clearly through success and struggle is rare. We've had the extraordinary privilege of experiencing both extremes together in compressed time. He squeezed her hands gently. My answer is yes, to partnership in all its dimensions. The Coast Guard seaplane carried them back toward Miami as afternoon storm clouds gathered on the horizon, much like the day of their crash. This time, however, they flew safely above the turbulence, the island diminishing to a small green speck amid endless blue. We should consider somewhere with water, Eleanor mused, watching the coastline appear. Not necessarily oceanfront, but with water access. Your father mentioned you enjoyed sailing as a teenager. Nathan smiled at her characteristic shift to practical planning after emotional revelation, the CEO's mind never completely dormant, even in personal matters. Hudson Valley, perhaps, close enough to Manhattan for work, while offering actual living rather than just residing. Their vision formed naturally during the flight, a property combining home and small operational center for Reed Community Capital's expanding workspace for entertaining and retreat water access for occasional sailing. Not isolated luxury, but connected purpose, reflecting lessons from both island survival and Nathan's father's example. 2 weeks later, as spring returned to New York, they founded a historic property in Garrison, overlooking the Hudson River with a renovated 19th century main house and converted carriage house perfect for small office operations. The 5-acre property offered privacy without isolation, nature without disconnection from community. The previous owners were retiring conservationists, the realtor explained as they toured the grounds. They're particularly interested in selling to someone who appreciates both the historical elements and natural setting. Eleanor, typically decisive in business matters, showed uncharacteristic patience in examining every aspect, testing water views from different windows, analyzing renovation quality, considering workspace functionality. When they finally stood on the dock, extending into the river, watching afternoon light play across the water, she turned to Nathan with quiet certainty. This is it. This is home. The property transaction proceeded with the efficiency expected when a financial CEO handles negotiations. By early summer, they had relocated both residentially and professionally, establishing Reed Community Capital's headquarters in the converted carriage house, while making the main residence truly theirs through thoughtful renovation and personalization. Corporate New York watched this development with mixed reactions. Some respected business publications featured their innovative approach to integrated living and working, highlighting Reed Community Capital's impressive early performance. Others questioned Eleanor's commitment to Blake Financial's traditional business lines, suggesting emotional decisions had compromised her legendary focus. The board's concerns surfaced during quarterly reviews, particularly from older members, uncomfortable with Eleanor's evolving leadership style and personal choices. During one particularly tense meeting, board member Harrison Westfield, a 70-year-old banking veteran, directly challenged her priorities. Blake Financial built its reputation on aggressive corporate finance, not feel-good community projects, he stated during her presentation of quarterly results. This Reed initiative, while performing adequately, diverts resources and attention from our core competencies. One might question whether personal relationships are influencing strategic direction inappropriately. The conference room fell silent, the implied criticism hanging heavily in the air. Eleanor set down her presentation materials, studying Westfield with the measured assessment that had intimidated financial opponents for decades. Interesting perspective, Harrison. Let me address it directly. Her voice remained professionally modulated despite the personal undertone of his critique. Reed Community Capital delivered 17% return this quarter while creating sustainable economic development in previously underserved markets. Our traditional corporate division delivered 15%. The board receives these numbers monthly, so I'm surprised you characterize performance exceeding projections as merely adequate. She moved around the conference table, commanding attention without raising her voice. As for the influence of personal relationships on business decisions, yes, absolutely they have influence. My relationship with Nathan Reed has fundamentally changed how I evaluate success metrics, integration of purpose with profit, and long-term sustainability. Just as your relationships with golf club members influence which deals you pursue, and Patricia's relationship with environmental activists influences her excellent green investment strategies. The direct acknowledgement of what typically remained unspoken, that all business decisions reflect personal values and relationships, silenced further criticism. Eleanor concluded by presenting expansion plans for Reed Community Capital based on its demonstrable success, effectively transforming defensive posture into forward momentum. When the meeting adjourned, Nathan was waiting in her office reviewing client proposals. How did the board react to the expansion proposal? With reluctant recognition that success deserves support regardless of whether it matches their preconceptions. Eleanor set aside her portfolio tension, visibly leaving her shoulders. Harrison attempted to frame our relationship as compromising my judgment. Nathan winced. Still fighting that battle even with the division's numbers. Some people require more evidence than others before abandoning comfortable assumptions. She moved to the window overlooking Manhattan's skyline. But evidence continues accumulating in our favor. That evening, returning to their Hudson Valley home, Eleanor received notification that the board had approved the expansion proposal with only 2 dissenting votes. The validation of their integrated approach, personal partnership, enhancing professional vision rather than compromising it, represented significant milestone in their post-island journey. Sitting on their dock as sunset painted the Hudson in vibrant orange and pink hues, Eleanor reflected on the transformation of the past 18 months. If someone had described this future to me before the crash, I would have dismissed it as implausible fantasy. Nathan watched a sailboat glide past its white hull gilded by fading light. Which part seems most implausible? Professional redirection leaving Manhattan partnership with your former assistant. All of it, but primarily the discovery that success feels hollow without shared purpose. She leaned against him, professional posture softening in private moments. I built an empire but inhabited a fortress. Impenetrable, isolated, secure, but ultimately empty. And now, Nathan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, the simple contact still remarkable, given her former aversion to physical vulnerability. Now I'm building something with structural integrity beyond financial metrics. Eleanor gestured toward their home, the river, the life they were creating together. Something that would still matter if another crash stripped everything else away. The observation circled back to island wisdom, identifying what remains essential when external trappings disappear. Both had carried this perspective into every decision since their rescue, evaluating options through the clarifying lens of survival priorities. As twilight deepened into evening, Eleanor removed a small box from her pocket, uncharacteristically traditional for someone who had proposed partnership on a tropical island without conventional trappings. I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment. She opened the box, revealing not a typical engagement ring, but a pair of matching bands crafted from aircraft titanium. Made from a section of our crashed plane the Coast Guard recovered. I thought it appropriate symbolism. The gesture practical, yet deeply romantic, unconventional, yet meaningful, perfectly encapsulated Eleanor's transformed approach to connection. Nathan examined the rings, noting coordinates engraved inside each band. The island's location, Eleanor confirmed, where everything changed. As they placed the bands on each other's fingers, the simple exchange carried more significance than elaborate ceremony could have provided. Their commitment had already been tested by circumstances. Few relationships ever face survival dependency, professional restructuring, family loss, public scrutiny. The rings merely acknowledged what experience had already proven. 18 months after their rescue, Blake Financial hosted its annual charity gala, the company's most prominent public event, attracting financial elites, political figures, and media coverage. Eleanor and Nathan attended together openly, their relationship now established fact, rather than speculative gossip in financial circles. During the event, Eleanor was scheduled to announce Blake Financial's new philanthropic initiative, a foundation providing entrepreneurial education and seed capital in economically disadvantaged communities. The program represented natural evolution of Reed Community Capital's success, extending financial opportunity beyond traditional boundaries. As Eleanor prepared to address the assembled guests, Nathan watched from nearby, still occasionally struck by the dual nature of the woman he'd come to know so intimately. In professional settings, she remained the commanding CEO whose analytical brilliance and strategic vision had rebuilt Blake Financial after Richard's fraud. Yet he recognized subtle changes visible perhaps only to him, increased authenticity in her interactions, genuine rather than performative interest in others, willingness to acknowledge uncertainty rather than projecting infallible confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice carrying effortlessly across the elegant ballroom. "Conventional wisdom in finance suggests success means maximizing shareholder returns while minimizing exposure. By that narrow definition, Blake Financial's historical approach proved successful for decades." She paused, surveying the audience of financial power brokers who embodied that conventional perspective. But what if our definition has been insufficient? What if true success requires more comprehensive metrics? Community impact, sustainable growth, expanded opportunity. What if financial institutions bear responsibility, not just to shareholders, but to the broader economic ecosystem? The question challenged fundamental assumptions of many present, creating subtle discomfort visible in shifting postures and exchanged glances. Eleanor continued undeterred, outlining how Reed Community Capital's approach had demonstrated that profitability and social impact could reinforce rather than oppose each other. 18 months ago, circumstances forced me to reconsider everything I thought I understood about value. She acknowledged, making rare public reference to their island experience. When stripped of conventional metrics, what truly matters becomes startlingly clear. Connection, purpose, legacy beyond accumulation. As she announced the new foundation's formation and initial $100 million funding commitment, Nathan recognized how thoroughly the island's lessons had been integrated into institutional structure. What began as personal transformation had expanded to corporate revolution, challenging industry assumptions about profit and purpose as mutually exclusive priorities. Later that evening, as they walked along the Hudson near their home, Eleanor's professional demeanor softened into private reflection. "Did I push too far tonight? The foundation commitment exceeds what some board members considered reasonable." "You pushed exactly far enough," Nathan assured her. "The metrics support the investment and the mission aligns with our proven model. Besides, you've earned the right to define Blake Financial's evolving identity." She smiled, acknowledging the truth in his assessment. "Sometimes I still hear the old Eleanor in my head, calculating political angles, prioritizing perception over principle, maintaining control through intimidation rather than inspiration. Natural echoes of patterns that served you for decades." Nathan understood these lingering tensions between former identity and emerging authentic self. "The difference is you recognize them now rather than being unconsciously defined by them." They reached their dock where moonlight silvered the river's surface into shimmering pathways. Eleanor paused, contemplating the water's constant movement. "I've been thinking about what's next," she said quietly. "Beyond Reed Capital's expansion, beyond the foundation launch, personal next steps." Nathan waited, recognizing her characteristic process of thorough internal analysis before sharing conclusions. "I want a family, Nathan." The declaration emerged with characteristic directness despite its profound personal nature. "Not immediately, but soon. While my age still permits it, while we have energy to raise children properly." The statement represented perhaps her most significant departure from former life priorities. Eleanor Blake, before the island, had dismissed family as incompatible with her professional ambitions. This reconsideration reflected fundamental shift in how she measured life's value. "I've been thinking the same," Nathan admitted, "not replacing what I lost with my father, but extending what he gave me, continuing the legacy of values rather than just preserving his professional methodology." Their aligned perspective emerged naturally from shared experience, rather than compromise both, had independently reached similar conclusions about what constituted meaningful legacy. The island's clarity continued guiding their path forward, even as external circumstances evolved and immediate survival concerns receded into memory. 2 years to the day after their rescue, they stood together on their dock, watching summer storms gather across the Hudson. Lightning illuminated distant clouds reminiscent of the tempest that had altered their flight path and ultimately their lives. "I received the final NTSB report today," Eleanor said, eyes tracking the approaching weather front. "Mechanical failure in the hydraulic system controlling rudder function. Maintenance records confirmed deliberate tampering consistent with Richard's access timeline." The confirmation of what they had long suspected, that their crash represented not accident but attempted murder, created complex emotional response. Rage at Richard's willingness to sacrifice innocent lives to conceal his fraud. Gratitude for their improbable survival. Appreciation for the transformation that might never have occurred without catastrophic disruption. "Strange to think his attempt to destroy us created everything we've built," Nathan observed, watching lightning branch across the darkening sky. "His worst action catalyzed our best possibilities." Eleanor nodded, fingers absently touching the titanium band that had once been part of their doomed aircraft. "The island wasn't just where we survived. It was where we finally began living authentically." As thunder rumbled across the water, they remained on the dock, watching nature's display, no longer frightened by storms, but respectful of their power. The approaching tempest, like life's inevitable challenges, would pass through. What would remain was what had sustained them on their island connection purpose, and the certainty that when everything external disappeared, what truly mattered became unmistakably clear. "There's a universal island waiting for everyone," Nathan said, echoing his father's wisdom. "A moment when pretense becomes impossible and true priorities emerge." Eleanor's hand found his as lightning illuminated the river in brilliant white flashes. "Most people never find their island until it's too late to apply its lessons. We received rare gift clarity, while time remains to live by its truth." As rain began falling around them, neither moved toward shelter immediately. After surviving island storms with nothing but makeshift protection, standing together, watching weather's natural progression felt like honoring their journey, acknowledging respect for forces beyond control, while celebrating resilience developed through facing them directly. "Some people spend lifetimes searching for what we found through catastrophe," Eleanor observed as they finally turned toward home, rain soaking them in seconds. "The courage to lose everything and discover it was never what mattered most." The simple truth, earned through extraordinary circumstance, continued guiding them forward through corporate challenges, family building, community impact, and whatever islands life might place in their path. What began as survival necessity had transformed into life philosophy, ensuring that regardless of external success or setback, they maintained unwavering focus on what remained when everything else disappeared, the authentic connection that had emerged when two people saw each other clearly through both struggle and triumph.